Hasan's reaction to Ana Kasparian. I don't know if I've
A lot
pre-seen
of
this or
people are
not.
like,
I know Stardust and I think Destiny might have like briefly they covered one of his reactions, but I'm not sure if this was the reaction they covered because so we'll see.
oh, well, Jank's your uncle, so you like still work at the Young Turks or something. Like, bitch, I've been on my own since 2020. It's been 3 years. I have zero idea on anything that goes on in those inside of those facilities. I don't know why people are just like, dude, you have to address your uncle's crimes. It's like, motherfucker, everybody has an uncle that they don't agree with. You know what I mean? I'm not the first, and I will not be the last. Anytime
His uncle's crimes. His uncle's crimes.
they get into some shit, they yell at me. Like, everybody's always like, bro, Hasan, address this. I'm like, okay, sure. Both you and Anna were my favorites on TYT when you were there. And while I don't expect you to know what's going on, I do value any commentary you may have. I'm just really disappointed, you know? But yeah, I don't know. It seems like all the empathy and sense followed you out the door when you left TYT. I think that transphobia is insidious in the way that it starts taking over your mentality and your life. And I think that's what is going on. Probably, I'm not fully aware of what.
No shot. No shot. Yes, yes. Anna and Cenk are transphobes now. What does that even mean? First off, and second, what has he even seen the interview, or is he just basing his entire reaction on what he heard other people on Twitter say?
Is happening. But the reality is this, right? My commentary on this issue is going to be probably identical to what I've said so far. That's part of the reason why I'm always like, ugh, we got to talk about this again. It's a situation where you can have like any kind of valid gripe, right? Or like any kind of minor criticism. But in many circumstances, allyship means you're not going to fucking like take a minute issue that's not even really an issue at all and like put it on the fucking forefront. Because the people that do that are people who want to constantly weaponize any kind of like cringe, for example, a marginalized community member might be behaving as. I've talked about this a lot, where it's like cringe is not illegal. And if someone is being cringe, for example, if someone from a minority group is being cringe, for example, that doesn't mean that like this is representative of everything. It's not politics. You're just like looking at every and any kind of reason you can to get upset at people. I don't even know what Anna said or did. I've only seen like some memes like this. You got to get your leftist card revoked. What the hell?
I think they're probably being transphobic, but I also don't know what she said. Like, why would he immediately jump in like that? Why would he immediately jump in and be like, "Oh, I don't even know what she said, but it was probably transphobic." Like, what?
Civil rights movement did not use the same strategies as the trans movement. They didn't barricade speakers when they disagreed in a classroom for 3 hours. They persuaded through nonviolence and showing America their humanity. It's kind of funny because like this take is not all that different than what they have said in the past. If you like really listen to what TYT says all the time, like it's the classic like, well, you know, MLK was nonviolent, whereas Malcolm X was like not the best. Even though Cenk does concede and say that which by the way is ahistorical, but Cenk does concede and say that there's two sides to this coin. And that you know, without Malcolm X, MLK doesn't work on his own. You know what I mean? So he does recognize that. It is pretty funny. I don't know who the fuck got barricaded for 3 hours. I don't even know what this is.
So this is something I've been thinking about too. Does there need to be a violent element for a political cause to work? And I don't think the answer, or a civil rights cause. And I think the answer is basically no. I I know some people say that like, oh, well, we're gonna have like the super hardcore like Nazi tyrant people on one side, and then we're gonna have like a nice group of people over here, and then people will be like, oh, well, you know what? Let's just give the nice people what they want, so the Nazis don't come in and do bad things. It's like okay, but the violent people don't do bad things, right? But I think that that's not true. I think that the violent I think there have been studies on this actually that show vote declines. We could look this up. Vote declines. Ugh, let's do our research. Let's not just spread fake news. All right. Places with civil rights riots and voting patterns. Oh, hang on. Riots and electoral outcomes during or after civil rights. New York Magazine. Okay. Okay. Here's this. Okay. JS Store. The persistent effects of U.S. civil rights protests on political attitudes. Abstract. Protests can engender significant institutional change. Can protests also continue to shape a nation's contemporary politics outside of formalized channels? I argue that social movements can not only beget institutional change, but also long-run attitudinal change. Using the case of the civil rights movement, I developed a theory in which protests can shift attitudes and these attitudes can persist. From over 150,000 survey respondents provide Data from over 150,000 survey respondents provide evidence consistent with the theory. Whites from counties that experienced historical civil rights protests are more likely to identify as Democrats and support affirmative action, and less likely to harbor racial resentments against blacks. These individual level results are politically meaningful. Counties that experienced civil rights protests are associated with greater Democratic vote shares even today. The study highlights how social movements have persistent impacts. Okay, so it doesn't say violent or peaceful, it just says protests. So protests equal more people being more tolerant. But I'm pretty sure there is a study that shows that if the protests are overwhelmingly violent or violent, then there was actually a backlash in areas with riots. They actually voted for Nixon. For a possible analogy to the current nationwide explosion of unrest in response to the killing of George Floyd, you have to go back to the 1960s, particularly to the long hot summer of 1967, when civil unrest occurred in 150 cities, mostly violent and most violently in Detroit and Newark. And the National Guard was called out in 34 states, and then the sometimes violent protests in 1968 in more than 100 locations, the most destructive occurring in Chicago and Washington. Following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., these large wave of riots were preceded by the spectacularly destructive Watts riot of 1965 in Los Angeles and smaller but intense 1964 uprisings in Harlem, Rochester, and Philadelphia. Yeah, but what electoral impact did this have? Another notable phenomenon in American society could be nicely bookended by 1964 and 1968, a radical decline in support for the Democratic Party, which was the national political party associated with the interests of African Americans. Let's see the source on that. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson and running mate Hubert Humphrey won 61.1% of the vote of the national popular vote. In 1968, Humphrey won 42.7%, the lowest percentage of the vote won by a major party nominee since Alf Landon, FDR's victim in 1936. This dive in support, which continued through the 1972 presidential election, cannot be attributed directly or exclusively to white reaction to black riots. The Deep South's long developing alienation from Democrats was clearly more the product of peaceful protests, successful civil rights legislation, and court decisions, and was offset partly by the steady enfranchisement of African Americans following the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But in other parts of the country where white people were used to con- viewing civil rights as a drama confined to the South, riots were a shock to the political system. So this analysis shows that in the Deep South, the backlash would have likely happened either way, but that in the North or in areas that didn't have segregation, it might not. But what are they? I want to see what they base this all off of. I want to see they have a study that they link to. And while many other disturbing things were occurring during those years, most notably the rapid expansion of the Vietnam War, the sights and sounds of inner cities becoming war zones, with helmeted white cops and National Guard troops battling black protesters amid burning buildings and looted shops, were indelible images of the era. Without question, the regular white Democratic voters were frightened or infuriated by all this chaos and began listening to conservative law and order politicians like Richard Nixon and his running mate Spiro Agnew. Okay, but I want to see what they base this off of. New study shows merit rights make, yeah, but let's see the actual study. Okay, I think this is it. What? Agenda seating. How 1960s black protests moved elites, public opinion, and voting. Omar Wasow, Princeton University. Let's just go down to the conclusion for now. Actually, let's go through this. The United States in the 1960s and early 1970s offers a useful context in which to test competing elite and pluralistic models of public opinion and policymaking. In that period, racial attitudes shifted dramatically on a range of issues. At the same time, grassroots activists mobilized at a scale rarely seen before, and elite political actors pushed for both landmark civil rights legislation as well as new forms of social control using a range of methods. I exploit fine-grained temporal and geographic variation in black-led protest activity to estimate effects on media and politics, examining the relationship between protest activity and news coverage, congressional speech, public opinion, and county-level voting patterns. I find results consistent with the hypothesis that black-led protests during the 1960s are independently influenced in media, elite discourse, mass white attitudes, and voting behavior. Further, I find that the types of protest tactics employed produce distinct reactions. Nonviolent black-led protests played a critical role in tilting the national political agenda towards civil rights and black-led resistance. That included protester-initiated violence. Contributed to outcomes directly in opposition to the policy preferences of the protesters. This analysis improves upon existing literature in two ways. In a number of ways. First, in the 1960s, important variation in public opinion, news coverage, elite discourse, and voting, particularly about social control, is poorly explained by both elite-oriented and protest-focused theories of politics. I show that a focus on non-elite activists, in conjunction with their choices of tactics, better explains much of this variation. Second, among the most important choices made by activists is whether to adopt nonviolent or violent methods of resistance. Most prior work in American politics, however, has investigated effects of nonviolent or violent protest movements either in isolation or in combination without drawing meaningful distinctions between the two categories. In line with work in comparative politics and sociology, this study contrasts effects of protester-initiated tactics with particular attention to the multiple ways violence influences media coverage and voting behavior. Third, the mechanisms by which subordinated groups might influence political communication are often hypothesized without being directly tested. Lohman, 1993, for example, presents a game theoretic signaling model in which mass political action conveys information to political leaders, but the signal is communicated without any reference to media. I show empirically that disruption seeds mainstream news agendas, and that tactics influence the types of issue frames adopted by media. Fourth, most prior literature aggregates data by year and state or country, obscuring substantial within year and within region variation. I use day, week, and month level time series and county level geographical units to better identify causal effects of subordinate group protests, and movements. Finally, endogeneity is an issue of much prior literature. I apply Granger causality tests. Hang on a second. What the hell is that? The Granger causality test is a statistical hypothesis test for determining whether one time series is useful in forecasting another. First proposed in 1969, ordinarily regressions reflect mere correlations, but Clive Granger argued that causality in economics could be tested for by measuring the ability to predict the future values of a time series using prior values of another time series. Since the question of true causality is deeply philosophical, and because of the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, after because fuck, dude, oh my god, ah, after this, therefore because of this, okay. Hey, I was a little close. Fallacy, assuming that one thing preceding another can be used. Yeah, this is how most people actually like kind of like view the world. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Like most people like you have all these analysts and pundits who are like, "Oh, well, why did this candidate lose? Why did Howard Dean lose the Democratic primary?" Well, it was after his scream, so therefore his scream caused him to lose. The Dean scream. Well, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, people want to explain the world, and we aren't really good at doing that. And usually there aren't like high level studies showing why X, Y, or Z thing happened. Like, at least not for years later, until years later. So people just sort of come up with explanations that kind of make sense. And maybe that's true, and maybe it's not, or maybe it's one factor among 10,000 other factors. And any one of them could change the outcome of an election, such as, for instance, the one thing that Democrats like to say is that the Comey letter or the Comey statement made Hillary Clinton lose, which we don't actually know if that's true. Like, could it have happened? Maybe. Like, did that sway enough of the 10,000 people that she needed in like these Midwestern states? Maybe. Or maybe people just assume that because that thing happened before she lost, and therefore because of that. I apply Granger causality tests. A panel. You know, I'm still not sure I fully understand what this Granger thing is, and I want to actually understand that. So the time series. When time series X when time series X Granger causes time series Y, the patterns in X are approximately repeated in Y after some time lag. Two examples are indicated with arrows. Thus, past values of X can be used for the prediction of future values in Y. Okay. So it's basically just taking two different graphs that have two different events and then studying that, I presume, in depth, where, okay, has this pattern been repeated in the other series? So there's a jump here. Does that jump show up here? Okay, maybe that's a coincidence, but if you see that every single time or over and over, maybe it's indicative of something. That's sort of how I read it. Or at least there's a very high correlation that indicates there might be something there to the correlation. Or maybe not. Maybe there's other factors that aren't being accounted for, right? That go along with these events, but that people don't recognize, or that we're not properly controlled for. I apply Granger causality tests, a panel design with county fixed effects, placebo tests, and rainfall as instrument for violent protest activity to plausibly identify causal effects of subordinate group mobilizations. What explains temporal and geographic variation on issues of race in the 1960s? Okay. Figure 1 presents data on what Americans, when surveyed, indicate was the quote unquote most important problem facing the country between 1950 and 1980. Looking at issues of race, two trends are noteworthy. First, from 1950 into the early 1960s, the percentage of Americans responding that civil rights was the most important problem remained low. In the early 1960s, however, it spiked from approximately 5% in December 1962 to 48% in mid 1963, and then faded as damn, that's actually pretty high. Then faded almost as quickly. Second up, until the mid to late 1960s, concerns about social control as the most important problem remained in the single digits and then gripped the country to reach an initial peak of about 41% of respondents in August 1967 before declining rapidly after 1971. The rapidly shifting attitudes observed in polls were also evident in swings in white voting behavior. Civil rights goes up, reaches a crescendo in what 1963. I think that's what it said. Yeah, and goes down. Where's social control at? Nothing, nothing, nothing. That in and of itself is not indicative necessarily that the violent riots were the cause, though. So let's see what else they bring up. In 1964, Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater promised law and order against crime in the streets, but lost in a blowout to President Johnson, a champion of civil rights. By 1968, though the tide had turned and Republican presidential candidate Richard Nixon successfully marshaled a tough on crime campaign to help win the White House, law and order rhetoric had been popular in the South for decades. It was not until the mid 1960s, however, that the slogan took root outside of the old Confederacy. In 1966, for example, Ronald Reagan echoed Goldwater and ran on law and order to win the California gubernatorial race. In short, the 1960s saw rapid temporal and geographic variation in white concern for race-related policy, first with civil rights and later with the rise of national coalition championing tough on crime policies. We don't need to get into those other theories real quick or agenda seating. That's not really the main. Like, this is interesting stuff, but I am on a stream right now, so okay. My goal is to estimate a causal effect of protests on voting, with attention to possible differential effects by tactic type. In addition, I aim to understand a plausible mechanism via media coverage. I began the analysis by using three statistical methods to test for a relationship between disruption strategies and the ultimate outcome of interest voting behavior. First, with county level data, I use panel models with county fixed effects to control for any time invariant characteristics. In addition, to address potential spatial correlation errors, I run potential spatial correlation of errors. What's spatial correlation? Spatial correlation means that there is a correlation between the received average signal gain and the angle of arrival of the signal. Rich multipath propagation decreases spatial correlation by spreading the signal such that multipath components are received from many different spatial directions. Oh, hang on, this is not in academia. Hang on, what? Oh, I spelled it wrong. I just want them to give me a definition. Spatial analysis fit each district's performance to its geographic location. Okay, so it's basically just using space, i.e., location, right? Spatial. Okay. Now I lost my spot. Empirical strategy. Let's just go here. I run spatial models. Sorry, in order. Sorry. Okay. In addition to address potential spatial correlation of errors, I run spatial panel models that control for characteristics of neighboring counties. Second, to address heterogeneity of units, I use various matching and weighting techniques to approximate treated and control groups that are similar on all observed covariates, though may still differ for unobserved covariates. Third, to further address endogeneity, the property of being influenced within a system. I use rainfall in April 1968 as an instrumental variable that approximates random assignment of violent protests. Finally, to assess whether the estimated shifts in voting mattered in electoral politics, I run a counterfactual simulation of the 1968. Dude, if this is assuming these models are actually good and the data is good, like fuck. Okay. I mean this this basically, if this is true, which I'm gonna try and find evidence that it's wrong too, then this left-wing argument is just complete trash. Like they should stop using it immediately. If this is if this is all accurate. The agenda seating model makes specific predictions about the effects of subordinate groups protests on dominant group voting behavior. Aggregate measures of county level demographics and voting may not accurately reflect the individual behavior of white voters. Consequently, I conduct a variety of homogeneous place and placebo tests. The hypersegregation of Americans by race offers one solution to the ecological inference problem through a form of extreme case analysis. By limiting some statistical analysis to counties that are 90% white, county level data on Democratic vote share serve as as reasonably good estimates of individual level white voting behavior. To test the mechanisms by which protests are influencing politics, I again use multiple methods. First, I present plots to show the punctuated patterns of protest activity corresponding closely to changes in front page news coverage, elite discourse, and public opinion. I also present results from Granger causality tests that estimate whether trends in protest activity, front page news coverage, congressional speech, and public opinion are able to forecast one another. As a further test of agenda seating, I show that violence by activists, even when controlling for violence by police, increases coverage and prominence in the New York Times. So violence is good at getting you covered in the news. In addition, I show that protest tactics influence the language and frames employed by reporters, again, even when accounting for state violence. Across all tests, I show differential effects by disruption tactic. Though the model predicts protests influence politics through news coverage, I do not use a mediation model as I lack county level measures of news in the 1960s. Table 2 presents an overview of the questions, methods, and data. Main findings are presented below in coefficient plots or figures. Regression tables and additional robustness checks appear in the appendix. Okay. Do protests sway voters? Protest equal voting? Protest election? Do activists lead or follow? Do tactics shape coverage? Issue framing, text analysis. Okay. Data and variables of interest. Wait, how much longer is this? I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Let's just go through some of the highlights here on the data. Like, we can go through it all later if you guys want to, but this is a lot. So all counties, change in Democratic vote share, and this is it's positive change. Each point represents a coefficient along with the 90% and 95% confidence interval for the estimated effect of protests on change in county level Democratic vote share in the presidential elections of 1964, 1968, and 1972, with county fixed effects. Models using DCA data measure protest activity using participants with Carter data, arrests, other specifications seen. Okay. Okay, so positively correlated with an improvement in Democratic vote share, negatively correlated. All counties, so nonviolent protests. Nonviolent protests are associated with a positive increase in Democratic vote share in all counties and in counties that are 90% white. What does the matched mean? The OLS matched weighted and second stage variable models all take the form of okay. Violent protests, DCA data. Okay, so depending on which data set you look at, violent protests either have a moderate moderate but sizable impact on voting patterns, or if you look at this other data set, the Carter data set, it has a severely negative. So either violent protests are somewhat negative or extremely negative, depending on which data set you look at. Okay. Public opinion about civil rights, headlines with civil rights, nonviolent protest participants. Oh, that's a whole other topic, but that's interesting. All right. Anyway, actually, what's the name of this author? Can you not undo the closed tear history? Is wrong about riots. Is this like the only guy who studied this? Are we really basing all of our political discourse on this on like one fucking study? Or there's no studies that show the opposite, are there? Because I'm pretty sure like there have been studies on violence before that probably indicate that it results in I mean, there's obviously case studies on it, but I don't know about like detailed analyses other than this one. But I see no articles or studies showing the opposite. So I'm not sure why. I guess the left just adopted this view because it's convenient for them to adopt. Sorry, Hasan, but you're gonna say stuff like maybe you should like look it up a little bit.
The irony is that like yeah, all kinds of
How
political
caveated was his claim?
past, if you like really listen to what DYT says all the time, like it's the classic like, well, MLK was nonviolent, whereas Malcolm X was like not the best. Even though Cenk does concede and say that which by the way is ahistorical, but Cenk does concede and say that there's two sides to this coin, and that without Malcolm X, MLK doesn't work on his own. You know what I mean? So he does recognize that. It is pretty funny. I don't know who the fuck got.
I mean, if he recognizes it, doesn't seem to be based on evidence. And we also have, of course, the example of gay rights, which we got without having to resort to violence pretty much at all. Like that was one of like the most peaceful movements probably in human history, and extremely successful in a very short time span. Would be a counterexample too.
Barricaded for 3 hours. I don't even know what this is. The irony is that like yeah, all kinds of political movements that have worked against hierarchical constructs are always going to be considered violent because they're uprooting the pre-established norms, the pre-established rules of society. So ultimately, it doesn't matter, even if it's like literally baby politics. In the same way that shitting on trans people and the violence that comes along with that, or the normalization of the violence that comes along with that, is not seen as violent because it is the pre-existing construct. You can go out and dehumanize trans people. You can go out and like misgender trans people, and there's going to be debate around whether or not that is even hate speech to begin with. That in and of itself.
Wait, how is I don't misgender people, but how is misgendering people a form of violence?
Is a clear and obvious indication that as long as you are on board with the pre-existing hierarchical standards, then you're never going to be seen as quote unquote violent. So this is ahistorical, especially from that perspective, because the civil rights movement, regardless of all of the non-violent components, all of the peaceful non-violent forms of resistance, was overall at the time, and still even to this day, seen as a violent movement. The only reason why people don't consider it a quote, full-blown violent movement now is because we live in the post-civil rights movement world where some of those civil liberties that were gained, which are being shred to bits every single fucking day, are taken for granted. Like you can't go back and be like MLK was a bad guy because we live in the post MLK world. Whereas at the time, holy shit, people certainly were not fond of Martin Luther King. I think what was it like at the time of his assassination, he had a 25% approval rating. 66% of Americans disagreed with Martin Luther King. It's actually
this is a little bit of a dishonest framing on his part. I was trying to do some research on this the other day, but Martin Luther King's approval rating was actually, I believe, net positive. It was, I think, negative like 25% yes when he was killed, but at the height of the civil rights movement, prior to his assassination, actually, he actually had a very high approval rating. Luther King Jr. approval rating. The last Gallup poll, yeah, that's what everyone based this off of, unfavorable. But if you look at his polling prior to his assassination, like if you look at the years, years when he was mostly focused on civil rights before he moved on mostly to, depends on what you mean by violence, which it can be useful to consider expansive. Well, I think you have to be very careful considering violence expansively. Like if we're going to characterize words as violent, I mean, you can hop on and debate me on this if you want. You got stream access, but no, I don't think you can qualify calling someone names or being rude or being an asshole as violence. You might be a dick, but that's not the same as engaging in violence. And the way we think about that and respond to that as a society are definitely going to be different. During the 1960s, King was a very divisive figure. The last Gallup poll to ask about his popularity during his lifetime, taken in 1966, found his unfavorable rating was 63%. This included 39% of Americans who gave him a -5 rating on a time scale, with -5 being the least favorable and +5 being the most favorable. King's highly negative rating came when he had turned his attention from Southern de jure segregation toward de facto segregation in northern cities. Was 44% the highest he was at? But even before then, King was far from a universally liked person. In the middle of 1964, when Congress was in the midst of passing Lenny Landmark civil rights laws, King's favorability rating was just 44%. His unfavorability rating was basically equal at 38%. Okay, so I guess he wasn't net positive, but he was 44%. So it is a bit dishonest because everyone always uses Martin Luther King Jr. only had a 25% approval rating. It's like, yeah, at one point in time, at that snapshot, that moment. But prior to that, he did have a 44% approval rating, which is basically 50-50. Also Stonewall. I mean, the vast. I mean, there might have been like some violent incidents in the gay rights movement, but by and large, like it was probably 95%, if not more, peaceful. I would say. Also, well, yeah, if you want to, I'm at work at the moment. Well, if you want to hop on after, you can. We can debate something if you want. Up to you.
Insane that this is the hill she's dying on. This is what listening to Jesse Single does to your brain. She literally admitted to subscribing to his Substack and podcast. Oh no. Always amazing to see Anna and Jen keep seeing a song getting more and more popular instead of thinking, hey, maybe we gotta shift a bit more to the left, perhaps be a little bit more loose and casual to go to opposite of what if we were Tim Pool. I think one of those situations, one of the weirdest parts about like Twitter spats like this, if you are truly someone who doesn't want to highlight and promote more transphobia, is just eating shit sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta eat shit. You know what I mean? I do it all the fucking time. I don't know why other content creators don't recognize that like we come from a profoundly privileged perspective. So you know, there's no reason to ever, if you are truly a person who cares about these sorts of things, there's literally no reason to fucking constantly fight over this stuff. I get into it regularly as well. I get into spats regularly as well. But the only difference is that like when I get into spats, it's usually on like marginal things that people still have a tendency to turn into like gigantic issues on Twitter. You said this during the last UIT drama, they refused to take the L. Yeah, a lot of what I'm saying is the exact same as the last UIT drama. Like there's still a gigantic subsect of Twitter that thinks I'm transphobic. You know what I mean? It's laughable, and it ultimately doesn't matter. You know, there are people who are like, oh, Hasan is fucking, he never listens. Like, he never listens to allies. He's like transphobic. He's racist. You know, who cares? Just do your thing. Getting shit on and taking it is absolutely just a part of being online. And Gen Xers who are on Twitter straight up don't understand that. Yeah, people I think like, well, we've put a lot of time and effort. Here's a Pulitzer Prize.
It's interesting too that Hasan even recognizes that there's an issue here, that there's segments of the activist community for trans issues, but also like just activist community in general, that will basically call you racist, sexist, transphobe, Nazi, whatever. Basically, just segments of the left in general that will do that for no reason whatsoever, or because they have like extremely wild views. So even he seems to be recognizing that this is a problem, and he himself has faced it. And you don't think that that's going to turn people off? Like you're a millionaire, Hasan. You can take it. But ordinary people, when they get called racist and sexist, things don't go well for them in their lives, generally speaking. Especially if it's a false accusation.
Winning picture of the black students who, amid disputes with the administration, took over Willis Strait Hall at Cornell in 1969. The sanitized and child-friendly version of history makes liberals into reactionaries. The very plain reality of the civil rights movement was that it was constantly accused of the exact same excesses of modern movements, but the modern trans right effort is significantly less militant, not more. Yeah, 100%. Is this it? Terrified swimming champion Riley gains his ambush by screaming trans activists and hit twice by a guy in a dress after saving women's sports speech at San Fran State University. And cops say there were no...
To be clear, I think that's probably true that the trans movement today is far less violent than even the civil rights movement was. I think that's definitely 100% fair. Like I think that the examples of violence with the trans stuff is pretty rare. I don't think it's a largely violent movement by any stretch.
Arrests. Daily Mail. Is this it? Is this what Anna's talking about? Also, what champion, bro? She's the champion of sucking ass, okay? Dude, it's so transparent. Like, all you need to fucking say is trans people suck, and they're not real. And, like, there is a built-in audience that will go, oh my god, you're so brave. You're so goated. Oh, King, please. You are a champion. You're a champion in my heart. These fucking participation trophy-ass motherfuckers, dude. I swear to god. This is what she's freaking out about, not what you're looking at. This? Why Bonus Hole is going viral on Twitter and what that means? I don't think so. Wait, what? Yes, it is Hasan, Jesus Christ. Wait, what? I don't make things up, but my point is that this stuff turns people off. It's not really controversial. The Bonus Hole? What is happening here? What? No way. She's not saying pussy too. That's the reason why we're mad. There's a new hole? Is it pussy too? What's happening? Was Obama right? I just realized. Pussy too is trans pussy. That's it. Trans woman pussy is pussy too.
Okay.
AKA.
I did pre-watch this part. I saw this on Stardust stream. Oh my god. What the fuck? He goes on like this massive fucking rant about bonus holes.
Hey, the bonus hole, dude. What the fuck? Yo, Obama was right.
And pussy too.
Protecting the transgender community is important. However, when you move out of or move far away from making sure that they are not denied housing, making sure that they're not denied healthcare, when you move into like these more fringe areas of like, I mean, there was a story out of the UK this week, blows my mind. There was an LGBTQ group in the UK who suggested that instead of referring to vaginas as vaginas because it might be offensive to transgender men,
Yeah, this kind of stuff I hate so much. Again, it's always like marginal shit. Like, who cares? And then you look into the story, and it's always, bro, this is literally the Gamergate neck-bearded weirdos that used to cultivate a movement around like shitting on the Young Turks and all manner of progressive politics online.
Hey viewers, he's calling us out. Which is hilarious too, because this guy has, dude, Hasan has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. Like, Gamergate didn't give a shit about the Young Turks. Like, I'm not even sure the Young Turks ever came up in conversation even once. I'm not even sure they covered Gamergate. If they did, maybe it was like one article or one video. Like, it wasn't like some big thing. Like, he's making it sound like, oh my god, the Gamergate neckbeards, we're attacking the Young Turks. It's like, no, I was there, bro. We didn't give a shit about the Young Turks. Like, you guys didn't come up at all. Like, not even like once, okay? Like, we did not care about you at all.
In the 2014, 2015, 2015 era of online politics. You read a one-sided article that looks at like some extremely fringe shit, and then you represent it as though this is like a community-backed movement, and then you get mad about it. It's like, instead of going, yeah, who cares about this? It's some random fringe shit. Shut the fuck up, please. And then move on and talk about the actual issue at hand, which is anti-trans legislation being passed at the state legislature level that is genuinely harmful, which I know Anna would probably consider as well. Like, getting annoyed at a singular trans person, or getting annoyed at like one random fucking fringe group being like, we can't call it a vagina, we need to call it something else. It's just
So
so
here's
it's
an
silly.
interesting
It's just
question here.
unproductive. It's counterproductive if you
We have good reason to think, and right, maybe new studies will come out and will show that like violent protests are like super great at winning hearts and minds. I don't think that will be the case. That goes against my priors, and it goes against the data that we do seem to have. But what does this extremely cringe shit do? Like, does this extremely cringe shit like birthing person, bonus hole, Latinx, like, does this stuff actually help you win elections or lose them? Because I'd bet, and this is anecdotal, but I'd bet 1,000% that this stuff hurts. Like, we know that only 3% of Latinos like the term Latinx. So you can say, oh well, the Latinx thing is cringe, whatever. Just ignore it. Don't talk about the Latinx thing. There's more important things to talk about than the Latinx thing. But it's like, okay, but if you're out there saying this, and people are encountering this in the world, and it's turning them off, like, maybe you should spend some time and talk about that and condemn that. And in fact, I think even Hasan de facto agrees with this point, because he spends like 45 minutes, like the rest of this video is him talking about the bonus hole thing. Look at this. He's still on about it. He's still on about it like 10 minutes later. Look at this. Or 20 minutes later, whatever. Oh my god, are you kidding me? Wow. I better switch to the OBS. But yeah, he's still talking about it like 15 minutes into the video.
a lot of people are like, oh well, James, to assuming they're real, are now going to stop. The reason why the right turns these anecdotes into national stories is to specifically demonize the entire movement. Assuming they are real, I just linked to it. The right turns these anecdotes to national stories because they know it will turn people off. My argument is a little bit more strategic and tactful to secure healthcare and housing for the trans community. That's my point.
Seems like a perfectly reasonable point.
Well said, Anna. So I get having disagreements on optics with trans people on certain issues, and I get feeling frustrated.
Yeah, look, he goes back to
Every
the
trans
article.
person is. That's just a criminal, okay? That's like individually a criminal.
So even he would seems to recognize that, okay, look, we got to nip this thing in the butt. We got to go out here. We got to condemn this whole bonus hole shit because this is fucking crazy. Right? Even he spends the time to critique this. So why is he upset that Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur are doing the same thing? Anyway, let's go back to where we were.
History makes liberals into reactionaries. A very plain reality. He's like transphobic. He's racist.
But yeah, anyway, yeah. Dude, fucking everybody hates this shit. Like, they fucking hate this shit. Like, I don't think there's anybody who hears like bonus hole or birthing person and is like, okay, I'm going to become more trans sympathetic. I feel like they hear that shit and it turns them into like fucking like full blown Nazis, or it moves them more to the right. And like when you experience enough of that and you move enough to the right, like you're probably gonna turn like into like a full blown like fascist. We gotta save the kids. We gotta save America from the socialists who are trying to promote. That's why this rhetoric I feel is out there, because so many people have been blackpilled by this crazy fringe shit. And it wouldn't be a problem if like normal left-wing people like myself, including people who are like pro-trans and pro whatever cause you care about, would be like, okay, look, the bonus whole thing, no, that's crazy. Okay, let's just focus on like the important things like anti-discrimination laws and like things that actually matter in the world, and not this crazy thing. So that's crazy. Let's just move on from that. We don't support that. And okay, then you can have like the real conversation. But if you're out there defending it, or you're out there being like, "Oh, who cares? Who cares that we're redefining words? Who cares that I called you Latinx? Vote for me anyway." No, like that's not going to win people over. That's not going to be effective. I'm like, like if you truly care about being effective, like why would you do this shit? Why would you purposely try to push as many people away as possible? I mean, like, that basically seems like what it is. It seems like you've created this thing. We're not even gonna, you don't even have a vagina anymore. You got a bonus hole. Like, what the fuck? Like, why? Who thought this was a good idea? Oh my god, it's just so frustrating because I feel like we're not making any progress here. I feel like maybe we are actually. I mean, I don't know. Like because the fact that the Young Turks, like the largest progressive um, alternative media channel, the fact that both of their hosts, Cenk and Anna, have been out there condemning this stuff as of like 4 days ago, 6 days ago, 7 days ago. Actually, it might be like 8 or 9 days now. The fact that they're out there condemning this stuff, maybe we're going to see a change, and we're going to see a more thoughtful and nuanced conversation moving forward that's focused on the things that actually matter, including things that actually matter to trans people, and not like this crazy bonus whole thing that like I bet even most trans people would probably look at this and be like, okay, that's probably too far.
Who cares? Just do your thing. Getting shit on and taking it is absolutely just a part of being online. And Gen Xers who are on Twitter straight up don't understand that. Yeah, people I think like, well, we've put a lot of time and effort. Here's a Pulitzer Prize winning picture of the black students who, amid disputes with the administration, took over Willis Strait Hall at Cornell in 1969. The sanitized and child-friendly version of history makes liberals into reactionaries. The very plain reality of the civil rights movement was that it was constantly accused of the exact same excesses of modern movements, but the modern trans right effort is significantly less militant, not more. Yeah, 100%. Is this it? Terrified swimming champion Riley gains his ambush by screaming trans activists and hit. Wait, what? I don't make things up, but my point is that this stuff turns people off. It's not really controversial. The bonus hole? What is happening here? What? No way. She's not saying pussy too. That's the reason why we're mad. There's a new hole? Is it pussy too? What's happening? Was Obama right? I just realized. Pussy too is trans pussy. That's it. Trans woman pussy is pussy too. AKA the bonus hole, dude. What the fuck? Yo, Obama was right.
And pussy too.
Protecting the transgender community is important. However, when you move out of or move far away from making sure that they are not denied housing, making sure that they're not denied healthcare, when you move into like these more fringe areas of like, I mean, there was a story out of the UK this week, blows my mind. There was an LGBTQ group in the UK who suggested that instead of referring to vaginas as vaginas because it might be offensive to transgender men,
yeah, this kind of stuff I hate so much. Again, it's always like marginal shit. Like, who cares? And then you look into the story, and it's always, bro, this is literally the Gamergate neck-bearded weirdos that used to cultivate a movement around like shitting on the Young Turks and all matter of progressive politics online in the 2014, 2015, 2015 era of online politics. You read a one-sided article that looks at like some extremely fringe shit, and then you represent it as though this is like a community-backed movement, and then you get mad about it. It's like, instead of going, yeah, who cares about this? It's some random fringe shit. Shut the fuck up, please. And then move on and talk about the actual issue at hand, which is anti-trans legislation being passed at the state legislature level that is genuinely harmful, which I know Anna would probably consider as well. Like getting annoyed at a singular trans person or getting annoyed at like one random fucking fringe group being like, we can't call it a vagina, we need to call it something else. It's just so, it's silly. It's just unproductive. It's counterproductive if you are interested in defending trans rights. And look no further than.
But you can just condemn it and move on, right? You don't have to cape for it. You don't have to ignore that it's a thing. You know, like if a conservative brings up the bonus hole to you, and you're a trans supporter, right? Or just like if somebody brings it up to me, like if I'm debating somebody on trans stuff, and I'm the pro-trans side, let's say, and they're like, "Oh yeah, but dude, what about the fucking bonus hole, man? I saw the bonus hole. That's crazy, man. Like, what the fuck?" I'm not gonna be like, "Well, look, it's like we have to like, be understanding that some people are gonna have different definitions of words, and they're gonna like." I'm gonna be like, "Okay, no, that's crazy. I agree. Can we talk about something else? Because we both agree on this." And they're like, "Okay." Like that's how it should go.
The likes of Ben Shapiro, who regularly do turn this into legitimate discourse, right? I mean, look at it this way. Are we really going to act like trans people are not genuinely consistently under attack by the right-wing media apparatus when, like, Anheuser-Busch made one fucking beer can with Dylan Mulvaney's face on it, and now they still haven't shut the fuck up about it. Like, the Republicans still haven't shut the fuck up about it. Like, they saw Dylan, one of these sick perverts, who almost always is a chaser, by the way, literally was refreshing Dylan Mulvaney's like Instagram page to be like, oh my god, she posted a photo, and then they found out that Bud Light had done like one SpawnCon on her fucking profile, and they turned it into like a matter of national news. I don't want to talk about this shit. I don't think it's important. I think it's very fucking stupid. And I think that whenever there are certainly cringe trans people too. I mean, cringe is not unique to any kind of subsect of society. And trans people or activists can sometimes be very fucking cringe. They can be empathetic, but then simultaneously be incredibly fucking cringe. Like turning that into a matter of national news instead of just going, fuck that, who gives a shit, move on. Well, then you're participating, whether willingly or unwillingly, in just justifying a space for more transphobia to exist. So what happened? Let's see.
Hang on a second. I'm curious about something. What was Hasan's take on the Covington Catholic kids? Did he talk about this? Or he probably called up something else. Nick Sandman? I think that was the name. Maybe he didn't talk about it. Okay. All right, fair enough.
Let's see what happened with the situation that she's talking about.
Might be offensive to transgender men. You know, one of the potential replacements or substitutes could be bonus hole.
Wait, bonus hole? Wait, it is actually bonus hole. Why bonus hole is going viral on Twitter and what the term means? First of all, is it going viral on Twitter?
I don't know what's going on with any one particular alternate term for any body part, but it's not illegitimate to feel uncomfortable with a given term and prefer a different one, Char42 says. She continues with, it's not good to try to standardize it, though. It's a local issue within friend groups, really. But I wouldn't want to throw all peers under a bus by dismissing alternate term. Like, this is something too that I'd considered. Like, if you're in like a group of friends and like you want to call like your like they kind of, like this is something that guys do, right? They'll call their dicks like fucking weird nicknames like fuck, what I'm trying gotta drain the snake or whatever, right? Like they that's 100% like a thing that happens. But like if there were groups out there that were calling for us to change the word penis to snake, like I'd be like, what the fuck? Or actually, snake's not even that cringe. Like pick something else. Like we're gonna call it the long snake or the the bonus snake. I don't know. Like pick whatever you want. Like I feel like that'd be pretty fucking wild. Like okay, you want to do that amongst your friend group? Like that's totally cool. Whatever. Who gives a shit? But when you like want to change this in the world, and you're like gonna create an activist movement to make this a thing, to try and like force this on everyone else, like that's fucking wild. Like yeah, sure, like yeah, if you're in a friend group, like and you want to talk about that and use whatever term you want, like yeah, sure, whatever. But don't put it on other people. And also, if you're an activist, this is something I made a video about. My most recent clip video, or less on my main channel. That is not my second channel. My most recent one on my main channel was actually talking about this, about when I was a representative of Gamergate. Like Char, there's a reason, or Hannah, there's a reason you're in my chat right now and you're still talking to me. And we had a conversation, a pretty good conversation. I think painted trans people pretty well like a week ago. There's a reason you're still talking to me, because as a representative of Gamergate, I viewed it partly as my responsibility to always put my best foot forward. I recognize that people look at me, they don't just see Tachyon, they don't just see Netscape, right? They see Gamergate, or they used to, right, back then. So I had to always operate with dignity. Like, did I have like some fuck ups and like was I a dick occasionally to people? Like probably, yeah. But 99% of the time, I always tried. I always tried to put my best foot forward. I always tried to represent myself well and represent Gamergate well. Because, like, I'm not just me. I'm representing a movement, and people are relying on me to do a good job with that. And so, if I'm an activist for a cause, I feel like I have to always try and be on my best behavior and try to win hearts and minds and not be an asshole. Like, or not come up with crazy stuff too that's gonna make us look bad. Hannah says, or I don't know if you're meeting and going out or hooking up with a trans person, it's sensible to be like, okay, not sure where they're at with that stuff, and could always ask. Most like, oh, sorry, did I miss something? But I wouldn't want to throw all peers under the bus by dismissing alternate terminology. Or I don't know. If you're meeting and going out or hooking up with a trans person, it's sensible to be like, okay, not sure where they're at with that stuff, and could always ask. Most likely, if you're straight up hooking up, they're chill though. Well, that's, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know how it works for trans people with hooking up. Is like the internet a great resource, or do they have special bars, or do you just, I mean, because I imagine I should have brought this up in the interview. I imagine it's probably difficult because like you could be dealing with like some like super far right person and you don't even know. Or I mean, I don't know, maybe these days you could tell. Like these days everyone wears their politics on their sleeve, right? Um, anyway, I'm going to jump back to the video.
Gives a fuck. What, you know what else goes viral on Twitter? The most unhinged Nazi propaganda. Who cares? After spending a little time on social media, you have to be wondering what is a bonus hole and why the term is all over your Twitter feed. Whose Twitter feed is this all over? It's not all over my Twitter feed. What the fuck? In 2020, Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust, in partnership with the LGBT Foundation, LGBTQ plus charitable organization, began suggesting the term bonus hole be used as a way to support trans men and non-binary people. According to their glossary, a bonus.
Okay, so this isn't just a group of friends, right? This is actually a real organization, two real organizations, including an LGBT organization and the Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust. Okay, like these are two like real things in the world. I assume. Like I assume that these aren't like fake organizations. Okay, it's like a real organization. Okay, what about? Don't have a Wikipedia page though, so maybe they're not that big. LGBT Foundation. Is this a real group? Well, they have a Wikipedia page. If you if you go to an LGBT bar or whatever, it's usually pretty safe, and you'll get picked up like anyone else. That's what I'm familiar with. Okay, well, thank you for answering. That's interesting. I had no idea. I don't think I've ever been to an LGBT bar. Like I don't think any of my I'm by myself, but I've never been to one, and none of my friends who are in that group, I guess you can call it whatever. Um, None of them have like dragged me to one, unless I was in one by accident and didn't realize. Like if like we went like just bar hopping because we've been bar hopping a few times. Maybe we went into one by accident, but I feel like you might notice.
Alternative word for the vagina and recommend checking what? Whenever someone like Yahoo says it's going viral, it's absolutely not. Yeah, dude, if this shit was going viral, Washington Post would be covering it, which by the way, they probably will now. Bro, this is literally like trans girls calling their gawk the princess wand. Guys, find out about the new viral phenomena, the gawk, the girl cock. This community.
Well, hang on. This was like two real organizations in the real world, including one that has a Wikipedia page that said this. Like this wasn't like some super fringe like 5 people on Tumblr thing.
Of memers have decided to call their girl penises gawks, and it's going viral. And what we need to do now is arrest every trans person. I just asked my trans friends who were chronically on Twitter, and none of them have heard of it. Lamau, I'm chronically online. I haven't heard of this either. According to their glossary, bonus holes an alternative for the word vagina, and recommend checking to see which words.
To be clear, I'm not saying that this is a mainstream thing that people use, but it is something that's being promoted by two organizations in the real world, like not just people on Twitter.
Some would prefer to use. So like, how is this news is the real question you got to ask yourself. Because here's what I mean. Do I think this is like something that is very important for the movement? You know, fuck no, I don't. No one is going to be like, wow, you're not a real ally, Hasan, because you're not considering bonus hole. Like, this is some silly ass bullshit. If you are cis and heard of this, 99% chance you are falling down the Glinner rabbit hole. This is why I hate covering these kinds of idiotic fucking stories. Ultimately, I need to learn about bonus hole, and I don't want to ever learn about bonus hole. It's like, this isn't even Twitter shit. They are saying it's Twitter. It's worse than Twitter shit. You want to know why? They're faking and acting like it's Twitter shit when it's not even shit on Twitter. This is so stupid. On their website, Joe's Circle Cancer Trust using the correct language when you're talking about someone's gender identity is a simple and effective way to demonstrate support and recognition. Goes on to say that patients may seek care elsewhere if they feel hurt or distressed when a term is used that doesn't align with their gender identity. But bonus hole went viral today after conservatives like Leo Kearse and Oil London tweeted about it. Oh, that's why. Kearse is a right-wing UK-based comedian, and London is a British media personality who's most well known for writing a book about his experience detransitioning and the issue of supposed trans ideology. Basically, he's a TERF. I like that.
I mean, isn't this exactly sort of like the point I was making? That when you have crazy stuff like this, you're not representing your movement very well, then you're going to get a backlash. And of course, conservatives are going to jump at this. They're going to jump at this 1,000%. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they jump at this? Right? They have every incentive to do so. And normal people are going to see this, both from the fucking crazy group and from the news articles covering it, and from the conservatives. And 90+% of the people who see this are probably going to lean towards the more conservative side, or the anti-trans side, or whatever it is you want to call it. Like, they're going to lean more towards that side after reading an article like this, or even just running into it, whether that's on social media or real life.
Yahoo
or whatever.
News, boomer ass fucking Yahoo News is more progressive than the Associated Press, who's like, we can't use TERFs anymore. Sky News Australia covered this before you. UK charity group suggests bonus hole is a more inclusive to vagina. 3 days ago, 9,000 views, bro. This shit didn't even hit like the transphobia sphere. That's the point, because it's so stupid. It's so fucking stupid. It's so dumb. Now it's more relevant because Anna took the fucking bait on some random shit from some random fucking website that was like, oh, maybe we can call, you know, non-binary pussies bonus holes or something. And then all of a sudden now it's like an issue that everybody needs to fucking discuss. Why? The world is a massive place. There are always things that are happening that are idiotic, things that are happening that are silly, things that are happening that are stupid. Oftentimes you have to make that assessment. You have to look at it and go, how many people are actually using this? How many people are actually using this terminology? Are they using it just on their own, in their own circles? Or are they actually saying other people need to use this as well? And if it doesn't hit those metrics at all, if it doesn't hit any of those markers, then why the fuck is this existing in your mind? Like, you know, remember formative memories and don't fucking put bonus hole in your mind. It's so stupid. This reminds me of how trans memers started using transing as a joke and the conservatives now use it seriously. Yeah, Anna, Joe Rogan, and Bill Maher fall for every fucking chain email story, I swear. Yeah, it's just so stupid. It's so fucking stupid. It's so dumb. It is such a dumb thing to be upset about. And the only reason why I believe you get this kind of shit on your feed, and the only reason why you would take this seriously, is if that kind of transphobic sentiment is starting to take root in your mind. I have disagreements with extremely online activists all the fucking time. That's part of the reason why there is a gigantic group of people on Twitter, regardless of what their political background is, that says stuff like, I hate Hasan, I want to go to his house and fucking murder Hasan. And then I'll look at their profile and they're like a neurodivergent minor trans person. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck happened? Like, what do you mean? You want to come to my, it's almost always Germa fans too. They fucking hate me for some reason. I don't know why, even though I love Germa. And most of it is because they see shit clipped out of context and they fucking lose their mind over it, or it's like petty squabbles and minor disagreements that they hyperfixate on. Who gives a fuck? Ultimately, stay the course. If you truly do care about advancing, I don't know, if you truly do care about advancing trans causes, or just ensuring that trans people are not getting absolutely eviscerated in out of public life, then don't talk about bonus hole, please. This is just bait created to make like some random fucking transphobic British person Substack pop off. It's so dumb. Bonus hole. I love that. God, what's next? Honest question. What do you think the impact of comments like yours? Do you think this group you refer to, assuming they're real, are now going to stop? The reason why the right turns these anecdotes into national stories is to specifically demonize the entire movement. Assuming they are real, I just linked to it. The right turns these anecdotes to national stories because they know it will turn people off. My argument is a little bit more strategic and tactful to secure healthcare and housing for the trans community. That's my point. Well said, Anna. So I get having disagreements on optics with trans people on certain issues, and I get feeling frustrated that you can't even get your points across without people immediately, you know, saying you're transphobic. Here's the thing. Here's the reality. Ultimately, you can have like an optics conversation without jumping on the silliest things, the silliest stories possible that are exclusively turned into national news stories that demonize trans people. Everybody understands. Every fucking trans person understands, for the most part, that this shit is like stupid. Most trans people look at this and go, oh, here we go again. When you end up making it seem like this is emblematic of the entire trans movement, well, then you're basically helping out the transphobic people. It's kind of like, what's that lady? There's like that fucking psychotic trans woman, what was it, Yaniv or whatever, who was like a pedophile or something. I don't want to fuck this story up, but it always, like, back in the day, there was like one trans person that like the right wingers loved pointing to be like, to point to be like, look, like this person is a pedophile. Like this is how every trans person is. That's just a criminal, okay? That's like individually a criminal person. You don't ever do that with a white woman, or you don't ever do that with a white man. You don't ever do that with a cis man. You know what I mean? You don't ever go, well, you know,
True.
all white men are engaging in tax evasion, or well, this white guy, this cishet white guy hit my car and then drove away, which means all white men do this all the time. Like, I can't even make a good analogy to this because it's virtually impossible to see the dominant in-group in the similar way that you would a marginalized community. To be clear, since apparently this has to be spelled out, literally no one is saying that the word, they can't even write the article correct. They said the word bonus hole is mandatory for anyone to use, be they cis, trans, or non-binary. It's simply a suggestion presented for trans men and non-binary people, and presumably anyone who prefers it can use. Folks, this is not hard to grasp. Offering alternative terms to people who are seeking medical treatment is an easy way to be respectful of the gender dysphoria some trans men and non-binary folks might be experiencing. Whether or not you use bonus hole or not should be a personal choice. Sadly, some online just can't or won't understand nuance. And for the TERFs who see this as some sort of vernacular takeover, in the words of Taylor Swift, you need to calm down. All raps back to Taylor, baby. Yeah, I don't know, man. Why the fuck is this a story? And we can't control what all activists are going to say and do. They're always going to exist, and there's always going to be some weird ones. As people with platforms, we have to be mindful of what our focus is and how that may impact people who are watching. You cannot be serious with this argument. Why are you giving into the rhetoric of we can't defend things that some people view as unpopular? When you and Jank used to rail against that thinking, you can just admit that you're laundering transphobia with you talking like this. She's a public news figure. Like, if a CNN anchor did this shit, we would be all over it. Yeah, a CNN anchor does have a significant amount more prominence than I think Ana Kasparian. I'm not Anna. I'm not Jank. I can't speak on how they feel, but my assumption is that they've been.
I'm not sure that's even true, though, that a CNN anchor has more... hang on, let's see. CNN viewership. Ratings. Is there like a simple way to see this? Is it Nielsen? I should probably go back real quick and make sure my base. Right now they're just getting destroyed for no reason. CNN averages 494,000 primetime viewers. Okay, yeah, no, I don't think, no. Young Turks is like 5 million, and that's just on YouTube. They have presences elsewhere as well. Young Turks. Yeah, 5.49 million, and that's just on YouTube. So, no, I don't think that the average random CNN host, maybe they're primetime people, but even then, probably not, have more influence. Well, maybe in terms of politics, in terms of like, they can get Congress people to go on their shows, probably, sure. But in terms of viewers, I don't think that's true.
Getting shit on by the right for years and years and years and years. And the reason why they've been getting shit on by the right for years is not valid reasons. It's literally because they have been fighting against transphobia, anti-science rhetoric, fighting against racism, refusing to back away from police brutality. They've been doing that for a long time. And I think, pure speculation, I think that they get very frustrated, especially when they want to have like an optics conversation on how to present your best foot forward or whatever in activist circles. And I think they want everybody to just like shut up and agree with them. And I get that because
Hasan must not like me very much. First off, I doubt he knows who the fuck I am. But yeah, I'm having the optics conversation. So
I also feel that way sometimes when I'm just like, man, I've been getting fucking death threats since like 2014. I'm not a transphobic person. I'm not a racist person. Sometimes when I'm talking about optics or when I'm talking about activism or how to put your best foot forward and I'm speaking over marginalized communities and I'm speaking against, it comes across like I'm speaking against marginalized communities. I'm doing that because I feel like I do know better on how to present your movement to a broader audience. This does not mean that I'm a transphobic person. This does not mean that I'm a racist person. The difference between me and...
oh, okay. Actually, I think we might have the same take here on this.
And in this particular instance with like Anna, however, is that I'm not going to look to like a random, otherwise innocuous, silly fucking news story that is the type of news story that the right would absolutely latch on, to fucking create this this massive issue and highlight it. Some of those people in the orgs don't relay the point well. I agree coming from you and how you present it makes it easily understandable. Yeah, except those people are trying to do the right thing. And also, those people are overall irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean? It's dumb to hyper-focus on this shit. Does that make sense? Why I don't cover it? I think it's fucking stupid to cover something like bonus hole. It's kind of like, I'll give you an example that's even a broader example, right? Neopronouns. I don't fucking understand it, and I don't want to, and I don't care, and I'm never gonna fucking talk about it. Obviously, there are plenty of fucking debate perverts who are regularly in here who are like, Hasan, give me your thoughts on neopronouns. Give me your thoughts on neopronouns. Give me your thoughts on fucking neopronouns. And it's like, nope, not gonna do that. Don't care. Not happening.
Wait,
and in a lot of instances,
what the heck's a neopronoun? Neopronouns are a category of neologistic English third-person personal pronouns beyond he, she, they, one, it. Neopronouns are preferred by some okay, yeah, I've seen this in the wild, like Zer.
it comes across real fucking cringe, except for all the times you've talked about it. No, I haven't talked about it that much, and it's not really a thing that I talk about at all. It's pointless. It's pointless to talk about this shit. Do you get it? It's like getting mad at some fucking 14-year-old on Twitter who's using neopronouns now, you know what I mean? And the neopronouns are like dear or something. And now you're like, whoa, what's happening to society? It's like, dude, calm the fuck down. Calm down. It's not like a significant thing. There's no like, government mandate. Shut the fuck up. If you were to look at the neopronouns discourse, you know who uses neopronouns more than like actual trans people? Fucking right-wingers who are always like, my pronouns are suck my ass.
Actually, I don't think it's. First of all, the otherkin thing I think is pretty fringe. I don't think that that's ever going to go anywhere in society. I think that that's going to be a fringe thing forever, probably. But the neo pronouns thing, like Zer, yeah, I don't know. I see that shit like in the wild. Like I don't know if I've ever seen it in real life. But like on Twitter, you will see people with that in their bios. Not just like not if you go looking for them, but like you'll just randomly see it in people's bios. At least I have for sure. I don't know about other people. Maybe you have a really weird feed that other people don't have.
It's literally fucking right-wingers that use neopronouns more than like actual fucking trans people. Shut up. Shut up. Don't talk about it. It's just so stupid. Some deleted tweets from Anna the Juniper. Yeah, I showed some of this already. I don't give a shit how many viewers turn on me. I will never minimize any political violence of any kind. It's what losers do when they can't strategize and win an argument. You're fucking brain dead. Don't gaslight me to say that barricading someone in a fucking classroom for 3 fucking hours is non-violent. This speaker had nothing to do with the KKK. Disgusting. Barricading speakers is not violent. You are genuinely stupid if you cannot see how insane it is. You're comparing trans people to defending ourselves to groups like the KKK. The civil rights movement did not use the same strategies of the trans movement. They didn't barricade speakers they disagreed with in a classroom for 3 hours. They persuaded through non-violence to show America their humanity. I think people feel like everyone has to immediately respect their positions, especially when they're talking about like optics or putting your best foot forward. I myself have done this many times. This, however, does not change my perspective. And I also don't cover that endlessly in the same vein as like I don't talk about fucking neopronouns. There are always going to be certain things that you don't agree with in a broader movement. You have the capacity as an ally, even though I fucking hate that term, right? To look at something like that and go, oh yeah, this is fucking bullshit. Like I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. I don't give a fuck. The hundreds of pieces of
shockingly good take from Hasan. Actually, maybe not that shocking, but damn, yeah. No, I'm 100% against this whole fucking ally stuff. I really am. This idea that, oh, you're an ally, like, it's so cringe. I think we should view humans as individuals with their own thoughts and ideas and not like, oh, well, you're an ally. Like, that's such a fucking cringe thing. Like, no, I'm a person who thinks, and that's all there is to it. There's no allyship. I'm just a human being.
legislation that's passing at the state legislature level, or the temper tantrums that fucking right-wingers throw when like a trans person does like a 30-second spot for Bud Light, and it turns this into like a national trans panic, as though Bud Light is like personally transing you with a gun in your own home. All of that stuff is significantly more important. And I think if we're going to talk about trans issues, instead of talking about like ridiculous random people saying bonus hole, I choose to cover those things. And the reason why I choose to cover those things is because those things are actually important. You intentionally misunderstood what I said, you moron. Lol. No, I didn't. You said barricading people you disagree with is nonviolent. If an alt-right group did that to a trans speaker, I'm sure you change your tune. You're dishonest, childish, and batshit crazy. Not sure if you noticed, but states currently using violence against trans people. Curious as to see why you seem to care about the grifter who terrorizes trans people than trans people who are being affected by this legislation of violence. You don't watch the show, so you have no idea what I talk about or how often I defend the trans community. I think the fringe shit and activists like you turn the country against people. You're just too stupid to see it. So here's the thing. Offering a blanket, oh, you barricaded this person, you're engaging in political violence in a situation like this, and I don't even know what this fucking situation is, but offering that blanket is basically centrism. The same kind of neck-bearded centrism that TYT has been attacked by for years and years and years, which is why it's so odd to see. It's why it's so fucking odd to see this coming from victims of those supposedly centrist commentators. Ultimately, the reason why Anna has responded that way is because she does cover state legislatures doing anti-trans legislation. I mean, here, let's look at it. This is the reason. This is the reason why Anna says you don't know what I cover. Here's why. Republican-centered first trans woman elected in Montana, Zoe Zephyr. Inspiring Nebraska state senator shows Democrats how to fight. Tennessee passes law that bans drag shows and gender-affirming care. Do you guys think that in any of these videos, TYT is taking an anti-trans perspective?
You know, he started off very skeptical and like saying that, oh, I bet they're being transphobic. But I'm glad he's at least now recognizing that his initial take was wrong. Like, props to him for that.
No, of course not. The only issue where there is a disagreement, I know this, is trans people in sports, okay? They feel as though, and I can't speak on their every single person that works there, but I do think that in certain circumstances, there is definitely that little bit of transphobia that's like baked into the conversation where instead of going, I don't give a fuck if like a 14-year-old trans girl is actually participating in high school sports, which like normalizes their existence a lot better, and also on top of that, like allows them to have a level of gender affirmation. And I think overall, this like hyper focus on said 14-year-old in like different states and like literally crafting state legislation to dunk on that 14-year-old is actually fucking stupid. That's my perspective on it. And that it is completely crafted by psychopathic right-wingers and originally focus tested by like right-wing insane zealots that have lobbying groups and whatnot. Insane right-wing lobbying groups focus test what method of attack is the most successful against trans people. They find out that it's fairness in sports, just like affirmative action is fairness in getting into school. Like Americans want to believe in fairness, they want to believe in meritocracy, and that doesn't exist in the real world. But it doesn't matter. They still want to believe in it. So you do market research and figure out that if you slap on the fucking unfair sticker onto an issue, you can get a lot more people to come to your side. So they do that, and that's why TYT thinks like it's an irrelevant issue in the grand scheme of things. But that doesn't overall mean that they're like transphobic or that they are going to stop covering anti-trans legislatures. They are covering it, right? So for that reason, I think Anna thinks like, no, I am covering this shit, except I have a disagreement here with barricading people you disagree with being nonviolent. Yes, it does mean that they're transphobic. Yeah, it does, except every single person in the United States of America is transphobic to a certain degree. Do you want me to go back to the same conversation over and over again? Like, if you are a trans person.
Wait, hang on, I got to re-listen to this. Did he just say, if you oppose barricading speakers, you're transphobic? No shot.
And that's why TYT thinks like it's an irrelevant issue in the grand scheme of things, but that doesn't overall mean that they're like transphobic or that they are going to stop covering anti-trans legislatures. They are covering it, right? So for that reason, Anna thinks like, no, I am covering this shit, except I have a disagreement here with barricading people you disagree with being nonviolent. Yes, it does mean that they're transphobic. Yeah, it does, except every single person in the United States of America is transphobic to a certain degree.
Yes, it does.
Do you want me to go back to the same conversation over and over?
Yes, it does mean they're transphobic because of this like one disagreement about barricading. Like the barricading speakers thing has nothing to do with like transphobia though. Like I think Char, you would agree with me, right, Hannah, that this like if you disagree with a specific tactic that a specific activist has taken, that means like you oppose the activist movement. Like that's, or you're, no, even worse, right? He's trying to say that they're bigoted, right? That's what he's really trying to say. And he's saying, oh, well, everyone is to some extent, so it's okay. But I don't think that's a good take.
Again, like if you are a trans person, I don't know if you are or not, you probably know that already. It's the default position. America is transphobic. You know that is the case. There are plenty of trans people who were transphobic originally. They had internalized transphobia even. You know what I mean? Yeah, so you know that already. So because of that reason, you just have to like parse through just any kind of discourse, because there is like a sea of transphobic shit, and you have to basically pick your battles in that regard. It still doesn't matter. It still should not happen to, it should not come from like an otherwise progressive institution. I don't agree with that. A lot of these things that come out about trans people and what they're doing and what they care about is all in the same vein of like just creating just awful discourse around trans people. Just trying to fucking throw shit as best as possible. Be like, trans people are cringe, trans people are violent, trans people are pedophiles, trans people are fucking trying to, groom your children. There is a wide spectrum of anti-trans sentiment, all of which plays the same role, which is when you think about trans people, if you ever consider like a trans person, you want to think that they're somehow bad, or you want to think that they're somehow toxic. Okay, you want others to think that they're somehow toxic. That's what transphobic people do in many ways. This is why I say transphobia is a mental illness. By the way, trans people didn't barricade anyone. That transphobic fifth place loser swimmer barricaded herself because she didn't want to deal with the protesters yelling at her. It's a total lie that anyone barricaded her but herself. Yeah. And in most circumstances, the story in and of itself is also different than the way people cover it, different than the way transphobic people weaponize it, right? There's always some like some minutia that they utilize or that they weaponize against trans people. First-hand context, I work at SFSU. The whole Riley Gaines drama was a publicity stunt bullshit. They came back to campus for more drama but got ignored. They're not victims in the slightest. Red meat for chuds, and it's as inane as bonus hole. Exactly. Thank you. That is what I'm trying to say. And hyper-focusing on that and turning it into a larger issue like the trans people are doing political violence to their enemies is transphobic. You're creating more transphobic takes. You're giving more room for people to legitimize these otherwise really stupid stories. And I know TYT, and I know their coverage on issues like this in the past, and this is definitely different than the way that they've covered it. Ultimately, this discourse continues in the way that it is because you can just you just think it's like disposable. You know what I mean? You just think that the issues and the people are somewhat disposable, so you don't care about like what kind of negative sentiment it's presenting. At a certain point, it moves beyond like I'm trying to have a conversation about optics, about the optics of like activism, and moves into I'm dunking on trans activists on the timeline regularly, while also hyper focusing on some of the silliest points of contention that aren't even real issues at all. Because ultimately, if you care about practicality, if you care about praxis, if you care about like ensuring that the trans community puts their best foot forward, like all these activists put their best foot forward, right? And it's not like a genuine disagreement with like most trans issues, then you wouldn't be consistently talking about this, because lighting a fire under this over and over again as like right wingers celebrate all this shit that you're saying, it makes the discourse way worse. It's just yet another rendition of like trans people are cringe and stupid and annoying.
I don't see what's wrong with the just condemn it and move on.
And that's why it's kind of valid for us to ensure that they are not playing in sports in any way, and that like maybe there's going to be some drag bans, but we can turn the other cheek towards that. Even when Anna and Jank have consistently defended against those systemic forms of oppression, especially when it comes to legislation.
Sometimes I'm a little scared, or like I'm afraid of like talking to people who are outside of my race, because I don't know if I'm going to unintentionally step in it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's and I hate that.
Right.
Like there's this like, because like if all of the messages toward me and people who, I'm Armenian, but still they call me white passing, so just gotta go with that, right? If people who look like me are constantly told you are inherently racist, okay, you are inherently a bad person.
I
mean, if that's the start, and I had this debate with Jenk when it came to our rhetoric in regard to the other side, right? If the starting off point is you are trash and we think you're evil,
Yeah,
then
totally.
how does that? You're never going to move in a better direction. You're not going to move the country in a better direction. You're not going to improve race relations. You're going to make it
Here's
worse.
a question for Hasan. Does he think that Anna and Chink are going to go through their entire lives now in every single show talking about bonus holes because of this incident? Does he think that that's going to be like everything that I mean, of course he doesn't, right? He even said that they've in the past covered things in a way that he agrees with. So why would he be like, oh, well, now that they're bringing this up, they're adding so much fuel to the fire just by bringing it up? Well, they're bringing it up and condemning it, which I think they should be doing. And then I think they're pretty much moving on, right? If someone else brings it up to them, they might talk about it. Or if it comes up in a relevant conversation in some way, they might talk about it. But I don't think they're going to be out there every single day talking about bonus holes on Young Turks from now on and promoting like this idea. Char says, the problem with just condemn and move on is that it's usually a scenario where good ideas are being exercised clumsily and we don't want to throw the baby out the bathwater. Okay, well, what is the good idea with bonus hole? Or I know you're speaking in generalities, but is there a good idea with bonus hole or Latinx or birthing person or the Z-zer pronouns, right? What's the good idea that we're missing? I'm serious. I'm being genuine. Like, what's the good idea? And you can take any one of those. You can take all four or whatever. You don't have to defend every single bad thing that someone said or every clumsy attempt at saying something even.
And that's what I see happening. I think
the way to think about this is all lib shit, dude. This is literally liberalism in action. Here's why. It stems from like people having honest disagreements or debates or worse, Twitter spats, and what that does to systemic forms of oppression. It does nothing. Every single random fucking account on Twitter could say all white people are evil and deserve to suck shit, and that doesn't move the needle at all. Here, let me explain to you in a way that like I know Anna and everyone else at TYT has experienced through the Gamergate era. This discourse that Anna is engaging in right now is identical to the men are trash.
Gamergate didn't give a shit about the Young Turks. Like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck, dude? This guy's got no idea. Like, what the heck? We didn't care. We didn't care about the Young Turks. Like, why does he make it seem like... And he didn't say Gamergate era. Like, is he talking about, like, the general move in society in certain areas, at least? Well, I mean, I think a lot of society moved in a more anti-social justice warrior direction, quote unquote. Like, if he's talking about like that, but Gamergate era, like, dude, GG, and he said earlier that Gamergate cares about the Young Turks, that they were attacking the Young Turks. It's like, bro, Gamergate didn't attack the Young Turks. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, we don't give a shit. Like, we might have like criticized like one or two things over the course of like what Gamergate was like fucking 5 years. Over 5 years, was there ever anybody posting on Twitter criticizing Young Turks? Probably, maybe. Maybe you guys said something about GG that was incorrect. I don't know, or that we disagreed with. The good idea with other body part terminology is that it could be more comfortable for an individual to use if their dysphoria is severe enough that standard terms make them feel bad. Hmm. I don't know if I buy that. I mean, not on a societal level, certainly. Like if you're a therapist in a clinical setting and someone's like, please don't use the word vagina, don't use the word penis because it makes me uncomfortable. I've got a lot of dysphoria regarding like okay, like if, but even then I'm not even sure that's the best approach. Like there is sort of this coddling approach. And again, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know fuck. I'm just spitballing here. But there is this sort of coddling approach that we have in society. And I wonder if this like okay, if you're upset about this specific thing, you should avoid that thing. I'm not sure that that's actually good. Like maybe in some specific circumstances for some specific people, it might be. But we do see like the trigger warning stuff. I'm pretty sure studies have come out and shown that trigger warnings are actually counterproductive, that they don't help people overcome trauma at all. Yeah, and yeah, let's look this up again. I don't want to promote fake news, so now I got to switch back over. I'm not in the middle of a game, am I? Oh no, I am. I purposely picked a game where it's yeah, where it's just me by myself. The other people I'm playing with, I'm not on a team, so if I fuck up, I'm not going to hold them back. And I'm 100% going to fuck up. I'm just going to half-ass this defense. But that's okay, it's random unit defense. It's not much you have to really do anyway. Alright. Trigger warnings effectiveness. I'll do the New Yorker. I feel like they generally do a pretty good job. Earlier this year, Brandeis University's Prevention Advocacy and Resource Center released a suggested language list developed by students who have been impacted by violence and students who have sought out advanced training for intervening in potentially violent situations. The students' purpose, they wrote, was to remove language that may hurt those who have experienced violence from our everyday use. They proposed avoiding idioms like killing it, take a stab at, and beating a dead horse. I was struck that one of the phrases that they recommended avoiding was trigger warning, and that they proffered and that the proffered explanation was sensible. Warning can signify that something is imminent or guaranteed to happen, which may cause additional stress about the content to be covered. We can also never guarantee that someone will not be triggered during a conversation or training. People's triggers vary widely. This is a very long New Yorker. It's going to be a very long article. So where do they get to the meat? If those suffering from PTSD were responding to trigger warnings by opting out of reading or discussing the flagged content, then as McNally has pointed out, that would be concerning from a mental health point of view because the clinical consensus is that avoiding triggers worsens PTSD. Oh, I didn't know that actually. Huh. As McNally has written, I mean it makes sense, right? Intuitively, I think that if you purposely avoid the things, if you don't confront the things that bother you, they're going to continue to bother you. In fact, they might bother you even more because now you've avoided it for like 20 years, and the one time it happens, 20 years later you encounter it, you're like, oh my god, you don't even know how to respond because you've not built up any resilience. I feel like that's one thing that in society we've done a really bad job at. I feel like promoting resilience in people. And like obviously, look, people are going to have shittier situations, like some people, and some of that shitty situations is because of stuff that's beyond your control. A lot of it's probably stuff that's beyond your control, right? People who are born poor, people who are transgender, people people have different experiences in life. People who are in single family households, whatever. Um, you could even say that they have certain privileges and disprivileges, even, right? And obviously, people are going to have like very different experiences in the world, and some of them are going to be very negative, and it's going to be outside of their control to some extent. But we should probably, as a society and culture, promote like a degree of resiliency. You need both, right? You need to have the conservative view on a personal level, 1,000%. On a personal level, you need to have like an internal locus of control where you can address address things in your life and make changes in your life that are positive, and not just like blame the world. It's society's fault that I'm poor. It's society's fault I didn't get that job. It's society's fault that my grades are bad, right? That's a horrible fucking mindset. You know, you need to have an internal locus of control and like control your own destiny in life. And like you're gonna face certain challenges, including some that might be from as a result of society. You need to have that approach. Like the conservative mindset on that is like fucking spot on. But the conservatives go too far in that they ignore the political side, the systemic side, you could say. Like, yes, it's important that that you teach that you encourage poor people to better themselves 1,000%. But at the same time, you also have to like recognize, okay, there are a lot of people in our society who, through no fault of their own, are being born in like the world's shittiest situations, or who lose their job and lose their health care, and like we should have like government programs in place to try and resolve this, right? You should like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't tie having healthcare to having a job. Maybe everyone should just have healthcare as being a citizen, and we can eliminate that systemic issue. But we're also not there yet. So if you're an individual and you're like, oh well, you know, I better just blame all my problems on society and like instead of improving my own lot in life, then you're not going to go anywhere. So you need both. You need like the liberal view, which is let's address the systemic issue and let's address the societal issue. Let's solve that problem. And you need to have the conservative mindset in your personal life to try and improve yourself and strive to do as best you can within society as it exists. And not just hope and pray that maybe someday it'll get better. Chat says every person is a person in progress and is always working on improving themselves as many ways as they have bandwidth for. It's not really others' place to be like, no, this thing is the thing you need to be working on. Learning to endure things that make you involuntarily feel bad and then proceed recklessly to make those people feel bad. Plus, I don't understand the insistence that the person must identify and use any specific term, especially if it's painful for them. I'm not sure that could be critically argued. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not. I don't know. Like, if you're a psychologist, I think that if you're a psychologist, like, you would probably want to encourage your people to overcome them, right? Because if this New Yorker article is right, then avoiding those avoiding triggers is actually bad. But also, there was I don't think this is going to reference this isn't going to reference the study. There's actually a study I think that shows that it backfires. That they actually have a negative impact on people's mental health. Oh, resilience. Yeah, you're stealing my word. What the fuck? What study are they citing though? I want to find the actual study. Several studies show that providing explicit alerts to students that upcoming class content might induce unpleasant reactions offers little to no benefit and often backfires, only making them more and more anxious. But is there like a meta-analysis? Meta-analysis of trigger warning effectiveness or impact, let's say. Overall, we found that warnings have no effect on effective responses to negative material nor educational outcomes comprehension. However, warnings reliably increase anticipatory effect. What is this? OSF? What the hell is? Okay. Do you want to dive into this massive fucking paper on trigger warnings, or do you just want to just move the fuck on? Because I'm kind of leaning towards moving the fuck on. I feel like, at the very least, we could say with a fairly let's see, what is it? Let's see what it actually shows first, because I want to actually understand this, because I'm probably going to talk about this at other points in my life. And if I want to be a lazy fuck, then I don't deserve to be on YouTube. Trigger warnings, content warnings, or content notes are alerts about upcoming content that may contain themes related to past negative experiences. Advocates claim that warnings help people to emotionally prepare for or completely avoid distressing materials. Critics argue that the warnings both contribute to a culture of avoidance at odds with evidence-based treatment practices and instill fear about upcoming content. Recently, a body of psychological research has begun to investigate these claims empirically. We present the results of a meta-analysis of all empirical studies on the effects of these warnings. Overall, we found that warnings have no effect on effective responses to negative material, nor on educational outcomes, i.e. comprehension. However, warnings reliably increase anticipatory effect. Findings on avoidance were mixed, suggesting either that warnings have no effect on engagement with material or that they increase engagement with negative material under specified circumstances. Limitations and implications for policy and therapeutic practices are discussed. Huh. So basically, they're bullshit. Like, unless, hang on, evidence that trigger warnings are good for PTSD. Well, if this is a meta-analysis of all the research, at least up until the date of publication, then that should be good. That should be pretty slam dunk unless new studies come out. And I mean, when was this? Last edited, oh, created August 23rd. But when was the study conducted? Yeah, is there no way to like see a table of contents? I should be one to bitch about that. My own book doesn't have a table of contents. I know I'm a huge dick. In fact, I was at a party in real life with like 25 people. It was a party I hosted, ironically enough. And one of the people there was like, "Oh yeah, you wrote a like they wanted me to read my book out loud." And they're like, "Wait, you don't have a table of contents?" And I'm like, "Do I need one?" It's like, "Yeah, as it turns out, you probably should." Uh, but whatever. It was years ago. Or, I still stand by the book, by the way. I feel like the last chapter I could rework a little bit, but um, other than that, I mean, I stand by the book 100, like 95%. Anyway, this seems like relatively recent, at least within the past few years. Some research does suggest that trigger warnings may be able to reduce stress, but only very, very marginally. A 2018 paper, though, concluded that trigger warnings were not only largely ineffective, but also in some cases amplified the anxiety people reported in response to distressing materials. Okay, so there was maybe one study that showed. I so fucking lost that defense game. There's no shot I won. Okay. No shot I'm even still in it. Effective. Oh, hang on. Some research. Students are requesting and professors are issuing trigger warnings, content warnings, cautioning that college course material may cause distress. Trigger warnings are meant to alleviate distress students may otherwise experience, but multiple lines of research suggest trigger warnings could either increase or decrease symptoms of distress. We examine how these theories translate to this applied situation. Across 6 experiments, we gave some college students and internet users a trigger warning, but not others. Exposed to ex- but not others, exposed everyone to one of a variety of negative materials, then measured symptoms of distress. To better estimate trigger warning effects, we conducted many meta-analysis on our data, revealing trigger warnings had trivial effects. People reported similar levels of negative effect, intrusion, and avoidance regardless of whether they had received a trigger warning. Moreover, these patterns were similar among people with a history of trauma. These results suggest trigger warning is neither meaningfully helpful nor harmful. Okay. Wait, this is the study that's supposed to defend trigger warnings? Okay, like I've become like even more convinced now that this was that they're not great. Dude, we're almost done with this video. It's been so long.
Discourse. Gamer gators loved latching on to like
Dude, what the fuck? Gamer Gators! Gamer Gators. Oh, dude.
all men are trash as like the absolute worst, most unimaginable thing that someone could fucking say. And at the time, TYT would look at that accurately and go, who gives a fuck? Who cares? It's just like some person saying some dumb shit. It doesn't mean anything. It's completely meaningless. The idea like all white people are inherently evil is not a serious thing that people believe. It's not. Some people might believe it.
I mean, bro, I don't know. I don't know. Assad, dude, it does seem increasingly like we're living in a world where people do believe that, and I think that it's influencing the way they interact with the world. Like we saw with this, Destiny pointed this out with the city bike Karen situation. So many people. So, oh, dude, we gotta find his clip on this. We gotta watch his take on this. That's gonna be way more interesting than finishing this stupid video about bonus holes. Destiny City, or I think his video is Bike Karen, because I think it was Vosh or somebody. Dude, an hour and 27. Not forget it. Anyway, I'll summarize his take. Destiny's take was that people basically are assuming that she's evil because she's white. Like they are assuming the worst possible motivations of her because she's white. Same with the Amy Cooper story, by the way. But people are assuming the worst possible motivations because she's white, and she's white, and there's like 3 or 4 black men around her, and there's a dispute over the bike, and nobody really knows like who has the bike, who doesn't, whatever. Like that. Oh, the receipts did come out, and they were trying to They were trying to save the bike for later, or they were trying to run a scam, one of the two. But let's be charitable and just say that the men's motives were ambiguous, but she clearly did pay for the bike, and a bunch of people, the left, lost their mind, dude. All the left, like most of the left-wing content creators out there, all had horrible takes on this. They were all like saying that, oh my God, she's racist. She just hates these black people. And turns out, whoops, actually, she had the receipt for the bike, and they had to walk it back. Some of them walked it back. I'm sure a lot of people out there still believe that she's racist, just like the Amy Cooper thing. A lot of people still believe that that she was racist. Um, but they just assumed, oh, go, this is a white woman, and she's doing her white woman thing. Vosh even said that the other day. That, oh, having a white woman moment. Like, people fucking do believe this shit, man. They fucking have, like, they do have these horrible views towards white people now. It's really actually become, like, a real thing. Like, it might have started on, like, Tumblr as, like, jokes, but, like, it became real racism against white people. And like, I'm not saying that white people have it worse than black people in the United States on average, but I'm not saying that at all. But like this anti-white racism stuff, it's becoming like a real fucking thing that's actually infecting people in the way they think about the world. And you're assuming that the white people are. And Destiny brought this amazing point, which was if it was a black woman surrounded by 4 white dudes, all of the commentary would be exactly the opposite, right? If it was a black woman and she was surrounded by 4 white dudes who were giving her a hard time about a bike. Oh, 1,000%. We'd be hearing about how it's understandable she feels this way because of rape culture, and like we would hear like all of the talking points come out. We would hear all everyone's opinion would be 100% reversed on this, and that's probably true for the right too, right? Maybe some people on the right would have been like, oh well, they'd be switching sides too, and be like, oh, you can't just assume that the white guys are racist or the white guys are doing something wrong.
But who gives a fuck? And ultimately, white people still run society. You know what I mean? Who cares if some random fucking Twitter user's like, oh man, white people are inherently evil. Like it's not you as a.
I mean, this is a problem I have with groupthink. White people run society. It's just not true, right? Individuals run society, and most of those individuals are white, but also a lot of them are black too. Like President Barack Obama, the most powerful man in the world, the leader of our country, right? I mean, most of them are white. Actually, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think actually the people in power are about actually equal in terms of their demographic groups. Like, let's see, Con- Congressional Black Caucus percent. Oh, hang on, we just do the math on this ourselves. 54 divided by 435. Was that 12% of the population? So yeah, black people are represented about their percentage of the population in Congress. Now that's not true in the Senate. To be fair, zero, and that's not true for the Republicans. Well, of course there are black people who are Republican, but not or black people in Congress who aren't members of the Congressional Black Caucus, though. Non-black membership. Okay, all past and present are members. But yeah, there are non-members. But I mean, I don't really care that much, but 12.5, that's about the percentage of black people. Or this is 11. Well, that's from this year, 1162, 11.5. Okay.
White person still have that privilege. You as a white person can still completely fucking, override all of that shit. It's just hurt people who are just trying to fucking, be as exaggerated as possible in the way that they cover shit. It's hyperbole. I mean, it's all in the same vein. I think what Anna is saying in all these clips that are popping on Twitter, it's all in the same vein of like hyper focusing on random gripes and turning it into like major points of contention, which is what right wingers do usually. You know what I mean? And they do it very successfully. So if you are a progressive commentator, as they are, and as they have been, and they've been victims of this already many, many times. Like, I don't know why you eat debate. They are not. You can say they're not, but like I worked there. They were. You know what I mean? They have been shit on by the very same people who are now hyping up these sentiments. They've been shit on in the same exact way, as a matter of fact, that like TYT thinks all white people are evil. Like, it's like, no one fucking thinks that. It's like an idiotic fucking take. Okay? They say that about me all the goddamn time too.
Do you think that you get to call yourself some sort of like principled leftist who's out to do the right thing? How can you call yourself the home of progressives when you are actively cutting deals with fascists about the rights of trans people and then spreading transphobic nonsense to an audience of like millions?
Oh my god. Ah. I saw this video. Um, the one that Hasan's watching now. This person, she worked at the Young Turks, and like her take on it was like the most cringe. She quit because Anna was criticizing the bonus hole thing. Like, this is like insane. This is you literally quit your job over this. Like, this is insane. And like, yeah, her takes were absolute dog shit. I'd say this entire video I watched. I don't know if I saw the whole thing. I saw most of it, but it was complete dog shit. Like, it's like, oh my god.
millions of people. It is deeply irresponsible, and fundamentally, it's pathetic. This is genuinely embarrassing. The degree to which this is irresponsible just knows no bounds, because there are so many people that are literally looking to people like Jenk for opinions, and he's literally just giving them an open invitation to be as transphobic as they want to be, because it's politically strategic.
Open invitation to be as transphobic as they want to be.
For once.
open invitation to be as transphobic as they want to be. Bro, like, what the heck? Like, this is an insane take. Like, you criticize bonus holes, now you're just like, it's open season on trans people at TYT. Oh my gosh.
In your life, think strategically about what that means.
This is, you know, actually, this is really good. Yeah, this is exactly what is going on. I think she's 100% correct on that. Like the giving up on certain talking points specifically so you can be strategic is, I think, silly. And it's the exact same kind of triangulation that old TYT and TYT still to this day will shit on the Democratic Party for. It's just that they don't think it's worth fighting for. And that's the reason why they don't want to like educate people on why it's fucking silly and move on from it. Or they just legitimately disagree with it. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's great. That's a great point by Ben Carollo. Benny, you guys said her name is, right? She's trans, I think. She was a trans content creator at TYT. I don't know. I haven't fucking been involved in TYT for a very long time.
That means that you're going to continue pushing the Democratic Party to unequivocally support everything that the trans activists want, even if it's unpopular among the electorate. That means they're not getting reelected. That means they're going to lose to Republicans. Republican lawmakers who are passing draconian, disgusting legislation in various states right now as we speak against the transgender community.
Look at this. You're going to push a Democratic Party to unequivocally support everything the trans activists want. Like, shut up. Literally, shut the fuck up. This is so embarrassing. Like, Ana Kasparian, and like, look, I'm going to be real. This is my personal opinion, but whatever. I think Ana Kasparian is genuinely personally transphobic. I'm just going to say it right now. She's like saying and doing all of the things. She's referring to every trans person as a trans rights activist. Referencing every trans person as a trans rights activist is just on its face, literally.
No, that's not what she said. I remember I watched the whole fucking interview. We watched it on this channel. That's not what she said.
Transphobic. And it's one of the things that transphobes have been pushing for a long time is just calling every trans person a trans rights activist. I mean, and the media more broadly does this as well. And this whole idea of like, you're going to lose the Republicans. You're going to lose the Republicans if you cater to these trans people. Once again, is entirely debunked. Most people are fine with trans people. And when Republicans make their entire platform about attacking trans people, it actually does undermine their political success. We just live in a country that is very much not a democracy. It has all this gerrymandering, all these other things. And so Republicans still have like seats in a lot of places. I know, wild concept. But genuinely, if you...
Okay, I mean, look, I'm a very strong critic of gerrymandering and of the first past the post system. I would agree that the electoral system in the United States today is one, because of gerrymandering especially, and the first past the post system to a lesser extent, and money in politics to a lesser extent, but gerrymandering especially is inherently anti-democratic and does result in Republicans having more seats than they should. But even countries that are democracies, they all have right-wing parties and conservative parties in them. And because like that's always going to be a percentage of the population. Right-wing people aren't going to disappear. Conservative people aren't going to disappear. They're not going to go away. They're not going to go bye-bye. They're always going to exist. So you have to live in a world where these people's ideas and concerns are taken into account to some extent. That doesn't mean you give up your belief system, but I think you should probably be magnanimous in your victory. Or is that even, am I using that word right? Magnanimous, define. Generous or forgiving. Yeah. I feel like we should be magnanimous in our victories and like not just trying to rub every single cultural victory into their face. Like, no, okay, yeah, look, we won gay marriage. That's great. We can celebrate that, but we don't need to. Like, honestly, we probably don't even need to have the White House with the Kellers on the night that the Supreme Court thing, because it's divisive over conservatives. Like, but whatever. I mean, I guess that all worked out because now most conservatives are even pro-gay. So
look at their poll numbers in response.
So maybe the magnanimous didn't matter as much, but I feel like we mostly were. I feel like we mostly were pretty magnanimous in the gay thing, but a lot of the other stuff, I feel like we're not very magnanimous. We just want to shit on people. That's what everyone wants to do. Maybe it's social media. I don't know. Oh, StarCraft, this game is a big part of my childhood. The Blood Knight says. Char says it's doing the same thing as right-wingers, executing their playbook. Oh, what in particular? Oh, hang on. I'm sorry. I missed a comment. It's not that criticizing bonus holes is promoting transphobia. It's that entertaining and lending weight to the trans people are crazy and going too far. Because, look, it's not just a narrative, Char. I feel like It's not trans people necessarily, right? It's trans activists, but they are going too far. Right? I know we disagree on the sports thing, but like that's like the prime issue, I feel. That uh, the sports thing, and also I feel like some of the stuff with the kids. Like, there's a reason that all of the other first world countries, or a lot of the other first world countries, are taking a step back on the types of treatment that they have for kids. I feel like this is something that you need that people who are trans activists should probably recognize that look, there is a lot of overreach, and maybe some of the arguments against some of the trans stuff, not the that you shouldn't be allowed to exist or have jobs or have houses, right? Like none of the actual discrimination, but like the sports stuff. Like, okay, look, we really do need to have a real societal conversation about this. You can't just say if you and you don't do this, of course, but other people say if you disagree on the trans sports stuff, or if you think that maybe we're going a little bit too quick with the kids stuff, and we need to analyze this from a more nuanced perspective, that oh, you're transphobic. And yeah, you don't say that, I know, but other people do. Other people do say that. As long as there's at least two wings, one will be more conservative. That's just how things are. Yeah, conservatives are always going to exist. I feel like this is something that I've come to understand a little bit better, and it sort of changes the way you think about politics. Like, I brought this up on my first stream, um, that I feel like a lot of our politics are kind of like determined by our personalities, and like a lot of that's genetic. So, like, to some extent, like obviously our specific political policy positions, those are malleable, highly malleable, and they're going to change based on the circumstances, based on ideas you've heard, the way you interact with the world. But like, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, a lot of the way you think about things, the sort of like foundational values that you have in your personality type, that's mostly or not mostly, but a lot of it is genetic, and that's always going to exist. There's going to be genetic predispositions that lead people towards conservative attitudes, and so it becomes extremely important, or liberal ones, or whatever. The more egalitarian impulse versus the authoritarian impulse versus the hierarchical impulse, I guess we more conservative one versus the egalitarian impulse, the more progressive one, perpetually locked in some sort of battle throughout all of human history. And that those things manifest themselves in different ways. And we should encourage people to manifest those things in positive ways. And I think right now, the right especially, but also the left to a degree, but the right especially, is not manifesting conservatism in a good way. The people who have always been predisposed, or were always predisposed towards conservative attitudes, they could have gone a different direction than like the one they're going down now, where they're like embracing borderline fascism and borderline white nationalism and xenophobic leaders who are strong men who don't want to leave office when they lose elections, right? There was a different path they could have taken. There's a different way that conservatism could have manifested itself in society and in the world, but it didn't. And it didn't, I think, in large part because the left was way too extreme. The point Hasan is getting at is it's one random shitter on Twitter going too far and it's blown out of proportion. I mean, like, sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it's also official organizations. Also, like the Latinx thing, let's not kid ourselves, right? This was not one person on Twitter. It's like every single left-wing media outlet was all of a sudden using Latinx in their fucking. I was listening to like fucking, was it like 538 or New York Times, one of their podcasts, like major fucking like mainstream stuff, and they're using Latinx unironically, like insane, like like it's not just cringe stuff. Like some of this stuff is, I think the bonus hole stuff I think is a bit cringe. Is a bit probably. That was pretty French-ish. I mean, like, obviously there were two real-life organizations, one of which appears to be like a pretty big organization, that were promoting the official usage of this term moving forward in society. Like, that's fucking wild. But that's pretty, like, you didn't see like the mainstream media pick up on that too much. But like Latinx, 1,000%, like the birthing person thing, the fact that The birthing person thing, that wasn't pretty cringe either. That was, people were actually using that. Like, I don't feel like that was like one or two people on Twitter. Like, that was like a thing. And then I think it's mostly been walked back now because like people realize how dumb it was. But like it was a thing for a while there. Like not as big as the Latinx thing, but it was definitely a thing.
To them focusing on just trans people existing, it's not working. It is genuinely not working for them. It is undermining their electoral success. But of course, you can't not take the opportunity to blame trans people for their own oppression. Am I right? It's really great that Ana Kasparian is doing this.
And by the way, you schmucks, you're falling exactly into the right-wing trap. The Republicans.
It's not responsible wielding of that spotlight and exacerbates transphobia. Wasn't that part of it that Hasan reading it out loud about it just being a suggestion? Was it just? I mean, even if it's just a suggestion, that's still way too far. Like, I feel like you should have like some degree of basic optics. I mean, bro, like half the people on the left think that I'm a member of like that I was a member of a hate group 5 years ago. Like they actually believe that. They actually believe that I was a member of like a hateful neo-Nazi group because I was part of Gamergate. And like even I had better optics. And even Gamergate, I think as a whole, generally had better optics. Like, and obviously there were some pretty fringe stuff in Gamergate too, like the GG Revolt stuff. Like those people were like legit bad apples. Maybe not all of them, but most of those GG Revolt people, yeah. That was like a legit. They were like the legit harassers and like legit bigots. And we didn't want anything to do with those people. But but we had better optics and a better concern for optics than a lot of like activist movements do, which is insane. Like we're a bunch of fucking gamers getting smeared who have like opinions that mainstream people I guess don't like very much. Getting smeared as like being sexists who hate women and want to drive them out of games, right? That was like the main thing. And yet we cared more about optics than like real world activists who care about real world stuff. I mean, I guess video games are real world stuff to an extent, but
They tried everything. They tried anti-gay stuff. It didn't work. They tried trans bathrooms. You remember that? That didn't work. Kicking the transgender community out of the military. That didn't work. They drilled in until they finally found a little tiny nugget of like, hey, trans folks in like competitive sports seems a little bit much. And you don't engage them in that fight. They lose on everything else. But idiot activists, yes, I just called you an idiot. Activists go in there and go, no, I'm going to fall right into that trap, and I'm going to fight on the only losing ground we have, so we can elect more Republicans, so they can pass more anti-LGBT.
I mean, the counter to this is really simple. It's like the civil rights movement, deeply and undesirably unpopular.
right, if you're winning on like every issue and because like your arguments are good, like why would you then pick like a horrible argument to like try and win that horrible argument when like you don't have the data on your side? Right? Like I feel like yeah, I don't think that you shouldn't give away like get rid of your views. I mean because they're politically unpopular. I think you should advocate for them. But if you're actually wrong, then you should drop the bad views. And I feel like with the sports thing, they're actually wrong. And it's not just me, like this is like a super majority opinion in the United States. And even Schenk talked about it here, where they did a focus group where they were talking with people, conservatives and liberals, a focus group of 2 families, and he said every single person except one in the focus group, every single person agreed, no, they shouldn't be allowed in sports. Yeah, I never really knew what was going on with the GG Revolt people. That I kind of just tried to stick with the friends I made in the group, tried to keep them together. Yeah, I mean, I interact with the GG Revolt people quite a bit. I haven't posted there a few times before it went too crazy. For those who don't know the backstory, the uninitiated, the main Gamergate forums, including Gamergate HQ at the time, had banned some people who they thought were like bad actors. And I don't know all the juicy drama. I mean, I did probably 10 years ago, shit, or 8 years ago, but they banned them from the community because they thought they were bad actors. And they made their own community called GG Revolt. It was a forum with like 80 members on it. 80 posters. You don't have membership; it's anonymous. 80 monthly posters, 80 unique IP addresses posting there, including people like me who were there to debate them and disagree with them. So like not everybody who posted there was like a Nazi. Like there were people out there who were disagreeing with them too, or who were posting there because when it started out, it's like, oh, we're gonna be the Gamergate forum that is 100% pure free speech. Now, unfortunately, when you have a small community like that, that's 100% pure free speech, things don't often go that great. It attracts a certain kind of person, and then all the normal people. And there were a lot of normal people who went to GG Revolt in the beginning, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to post here. I'm going to give it a shot. It's just a GG community. It's 100% free speech. Maybe it'll be fine. And then 100% pro free speech became, oh, shit. Like, I don't know. There's like a couple Nazis here now, or like people who are like really bad. And then it became like, yeah, maybe we should leave. And like more and more normal people, including myself, were like, no, we got to get the fuck out of this forum. And so we all left. And after like 6 months, it was just like the Nazis. If there was one GG aligned person who did something optically bad, I imagine take issue with people saying GG activists are going too far. Actually, honestly, I want to read the rest of your comments too, but I feel like if somebody criticized like hey look, Gamergate people are going too far because of this, I honestly feel like we'd be like, hey, that's actually a step up compared to like the normal you're all a bunch of sexists. Like I feel like that would be a step up, right? Like I feel like okay, we're criticizing, and maybe I'd agree. In fact, I would agree with you, Hannah. I made so many videos saying that people were going too far in X, Y, or Z regard. Like I made like hundreds of videos on my channel dedicated to Gamergate. Well, maybe like if you count live streams, it's like 150 or something videos and streams altogether. And I 100% did call out people who were going too far, right? I would agree with you. I would condemn, and then I'd move on. And I guess it didn't work as a strategy because people still think we're the bad guys. But I still think it was the morally right thing to do. Anyway, I'm going to continue. Sorry, I'm going to continue reading your thing. Media expression in places like TYT will always serve to paint with broad brushes unless really particular care is taken. And I guess the concern is that was not done here. Well, they weren't even talking about it on TYT. They were talking about it. Anna was interviewed on another podcast, where she brought this up. Right? It wasn't even on the Young Turks. A handful of people workshopped bonus hole and probably internally, and then people ran with it and used it to discredit trans rights, and TYT contributed to that. But they did publicly suggest using this language, right? And it wasn't the Young Turks. She was on the Sitch and Adams show, which is like a medium-sized podcast, like not one of the biggest in the world, not super small either, like a medium-sized podcast, and they're pretty like center-left-ish. I feel like Adam might be slightly more center-right, or he might be more like center-left, but he's more to the right than Sitch. But yeah, like, not like some crazy like Nazi pod. So many people on the left were saying, "Oh, they went on a far right podcast or a right wing podcast." It's like, bro, like not at all. Like they're like milquetoast moderates basically. Like Sitch is probably more of like a social democrat almost. So he's a bit more progressive, but yeah, like these are not right wing people. And like even if they were right wing, like Adam is a bit more to the right-ish, and he's a pretty reasonable dude. So it kind of sucks that they got smeared as being right wing or far right because of all these people disagreeing with Anna's decision. We have Blood Knight says, "We were enemies of the media. Nothing we could have done would have stopped them from vilifying us. It was still the right thing to do to call out bad behavior, even if only for the sake of making the group better." Yeah, I mean, I agree. Enemies of the media. I'm not sure how I want to think about this. I mean, obviously we did critique the media, but I don't think The Economist criticized Gamergate because we critiqued the media, right? Like, yeah, 100% games journalists. We criticize 1,000%. They viewed it as oppositional. They shouldn't have. The games journalists had a perfect opportunity to say, "Hey, look, some of the stuff that we're seeing, we don't like. You know, there are people, not even necessarily Gamergate people, but there are people who are like actually harassing Anita Sarkeesian, and that's bad. And I'm not saying that the Gamergate people are doing that, right? So maybe some of them are, maybe some of them aren't, but there are valid concerns you have with different with our outlets, and we want to take that into account, and we want to take these ethical concerns seriously. We want to reform. Like they could 100% could have done that, but instead they chose to view us as oppositional. And then I feel like the mainstream press, multiple things. One, the mainstream press doesn't give a shit about gaming, so they just took whatever the game journalist article said, Kotaku, IGN, whatever. They just took whatever they said and just reprinted it, for one. And two, I feel like the only writers for the mainstream press, for the most part, who wanted to talk about Gamergate were people who had an agenda, right? So the journalists who work for CNN or The Economist and want to talk about Gamergate, they're not going to be ordinary political people. They're going to be people who have an axe to grind, probably are a bit more social justice aligned, which like it's fine if you hold those views, but it shouldn't influence your objective reporting. If you're trying to present yourself as an objective journalist. So you had both people who were in the mainstream press who didn't give a shit and were like, oh, whatever, Kotaku says this, we'll run with it. And then two, you had people in the mainstream press who were ideologically driven, who were like, I don't like this. I consider myself a social justice person. All the people on my team are on one side of this. I'm just going to go ahead and go with that side and back up my people. I think that that's probably more likely than like the mainstream press going after us because we criticize journalists. I don't even know. I don't even know if it was always them having agendas. Often it was just what makes the better sounding or easier to write story. I mean, yeah, probably that too. Especially like it's such a fucking bullshit cop out that I know maybe Hannah, you're in the chat here. Maybe you disagree, but I feel like they'd be like, "Oh, well, we can't talk to anybody from GamerGate because they got no leader." Right? That's like one thing we'd hear often. Who's going to be the person to represent GamerGate for the story? Well, they can't find anybody because there's no leader. But bro, these these same media outlets were extremely pro Black Lives Matter, right? Also, no leader, but they found plenty of people they could interview for Black Lives Matter. They couldn't find a single person they could interview for Gamergate. They couldn't look at who has the most popular Gamergate videos, right? That shit, they would be interviewing me in some cases, right? They didn't look at who's written highly in-depth articles arguing for the other side for Gamergate, right? There were plenty of people who did that, right? Ezra Klein actually wrote an article about Gamergate that was pretty balanced. You could find people who wrote pro Gamergate or neutral articles and be like, let's interview them. What perspective do they have? David Pakman, right? Let's talk about him. Well, or Kathy Young, like these like pretty mainstream figures that they could have been like, okay, let's interview these people, see what they think. Let's interview fucking Tachyon, right? Let's interview him. Let's interview Christina Hoff Summers. There were so many people they could have talked to. And if they said, look, this is one aspect of Gamergate, maybe even like the mainstream. And, it was the mainstream. Us being the mainstream GG. But, if they really wanted to cover like the harassment stuff, they could talk to trolls. And they could even go to like GG Revolt, where like you have like actual sexists. Or people who were more like super crazy. They could even go to like GG Revolt and interview some of those people, right? Part of being a journalist and doing your job is doing the research, doing the homework. So yeah, sure. Interview, 10 different Gamergate people, 10 anti-Gamergate people, Interview like 2 or 3 like neutral people like Ezra Klein, and then like fucking interview fucking 2 or 3 GG Revolt people, right? You could 1,000% do that. Although I guess in that case, that's a copy and paste from Kotaku group. Yeah, I guess that's the lazy group right there. Whatever. Let's just run with this. It sounds like a good story. It'll get us clicks.
Popular. Saying that like this
Dude,
in and of
this video, I'm
itself
never gonna finish
at
this
the
video.
time is not a worthy cause is exactly what Martin Luther King was criticizing when he talked about the white moderate. Yeah, Benny is on the money with this. I think it seems.
But I think the real icing on the cake here is this tweet where Ana Kasparian has decided to unilaterally declare Jesse Singal to not be a transphobe, despite, and this is what's really wild.
What the fuck? Jesse Signal, which by the way, I didn't even fucking realize his name was Singal. I thought it was Signal this whole time. He's a transphobic person. That's all he does. All he does is fucking.
I don't actually know if that's true or not. It's so freaking funny though that like all the woke people hate Jesse Singal when he was one of the woke people 10 years ago. Like surely I don't know if you remember Hannah, but Blood Knight, you surely remember Jesse Singal was like one of like the most die-hard progressive people out there in the world during Gamergate. Like he was like super hardcore on he was against Gamergate. And he'd regularly write articles trashing us. He'd regularly like talk shit on Twitter like all the time. Like he was a big Twitter shit talker. Never actually did any debates though, I don't think. I guess he lacked the courage of his convictions. But now he's like the anti-woke guy. It's so like he's like a complete like 180. But I don't read his stuff. I mean, I wonder if he ever apologized for getting Gamergate wrong. Actually, let's look that up. I don't want to talk shit about him if I don't know. Go apology for Gamergate. Oh, hang on. I did include his name. See it right here. Look at this. Should stop lying to journalists and itself. Yeah, but where's his apology? I am just okay. To his credit, he did a Kotaku in Action AMA 9 years ago. Jesus. But where did he ever apologize for getting it wrong? The name sounds very familiar, but I don't remember anything about him specifically. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. I mean, he was like a. I don't know if he was like hardcore, but he was definitely anti-Gamergate and seemed like he was like pretty friendly in the social justice camp. And now they all hate him because he's criticized some of the trans stuff a little bit.
Complain about trans people. He's got trans on the mind non-fucking stop.
I'm subscribed to Blocked and Reported. I have listened to endless podcast episodes from Blocked and Reported. I haven't seen anything from Jesse Singal that communicates to me that he is a transphobe, that he is a bad person.
I'm not gonna lie, that in and of itself is significantly worse than any of the other tweets that you guys showed me today. You could have just shown me that, and I would have. That is the worst thing I've seen so far. It's the whole like it's the whole show me why J.K. Rowling is transphobic narrative. You know what I mean? You're right to treat transphobia like a disease. No, it's 100% mental illness. It really is. Society's transphobic. You wake up, you grow up, you develop object permanence, and you also develop certain sets of standards. Transphobia is one of those standards. I've had this conversation a million times over. So there is like a level of transphobia that everyone has in the beginning. But then there's two avenues that you can go down. You either look at that situation. That's the reason why most people have apathy towards trans people, right? The overwhelming majority. They just like don't give a shit. They think trans people are kind of weird, but they don't think about it that much. So there's two different ways when you see a trans person in the real world, or when you are met with trans issues, right, that get blasted in front of your face. You can go either way. You either go down the route of like not being transphobic and educating yourself about culturally speaking what role gender is played in society and how different that is from our current understanding of it. You look at biology and you become not transphobic. I myself have gone through a similar journey. Or you go in the other direction. And the other direction is really scary because a lot of people do take that path and they just become incredibly transphobic, like further and further and further. Like every single day, every new day, there's another thing that you look at that makes your that melts your mind a little bit further about how like trans people are a certain way. It's really sad.
Well, Hasan actually, I don't know if I agree with Hasan here on this, but he actually does have an interesting point though. I have seen this with like I don't know about the trans thing in particular. I don't really know about that, but like there is this when you're encountered with the woke stuff, like with the anti-SJW movement, when it became big, like 10 years ago, when all these anti-social justice YouTubers and bloggers and journalists came out. It became pretty cringe after. I'd say most of them started out like really with good intentions and good arguments. A lot of them did, but over time, that whole space, or at least a lot of that space, where these anti-SJW YouTubers were, just became like, oh, everything is social justice, everything is woke. Like it's sort of like what was it? What Nina Sarkeesian said about wokeness. Um, I started to see the world that way, and once I did, I saw it everywhere. It's like it was like that for the anti-SJW people. I feel like they started to see wokeness, and they criticized like some of like the actual worst aspects of it. And then like 5 years later, these people were saying like everything is woke. Every movie that comes out is woke. Every video game that comes out is woke. Every comic book, every TV show, everything is woke, 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 woke. Maybe that's because of the financial incentive. That's what gets you the views. I don't know, but like I think part of it was like just a genuine change. I feel like they saw it in some places, and that made them very. I think they were more or less right in some of their critiques. A lot of more, but then they just like everything became woke to them, and that's all they could see. And I think that's the same with the left wing people too. I feel like with a lot of the left wing people, everything is racist. Everything is racist. And like I and there's like no charity at all, right? Everything must be racist. I'm even everything through the prism of critical theory, and like I must like deconstruct every aspect of society, and like now I can talk about how everything is racist. Air conditioning is racist, right? Like you could go through and you could deconstruct everything, and be like everything is racist. Like remember that was the thing. Sexist air conditioners was an article that was ran in like the Guardian that air conditioning is sexist because men and women have different preferences for air conditioning. Oh, they were talking about it in the workplaces that men and women have different preferences for air conditioning in the workplaces. Um, and because I think men and women on average have different views towards air conditioning, like how not air conditioning, but towards temperature. There are differences in like women prefer colder environment or warmer environments, men prefer colder environments, like things like that. And also, women can choose to wear more or less clothes in the work environment, whereas men can only are forced to wear a suit or forced to wear a very limited number of outfits relative to women too. And like there's certain, which is like actually kind of like a sexist thing against men that we don't that in the workplace we have to wear like way stricter outfits, whereas women can wear almost anything they want. A journal Char says a journalist could do that, or they might have interviewed Milo as the representative of GG, and maybe it's best for everyone that they did. Oh my god, true. Oh my gosh, yeah. I Milo. Did you see his debate with Destiny? Oh my gosh. Oh, it was. He's fallen off. He's fallen off so bad. Like he was never like a great guy, I don't think. But he's just fallen off so bad. Like, oh my god, we gotta watch this. We gotta watch this is way more interesting than the last 1 minute of Hasan's video. Plus, he's basically done talking about the situation anyway. I think.